The night Logan Carter signed the marriage contract with a billionaire he'd met 3 hours earlier, he wasn't thinking about love or second chances. He was thinking about the eviction notice taped to his door and the hospital calling about his daughter's unpaid bills. When Vivian Sinclair's pen hovered over the dotted line, her diamond ring catching the dim courthouse light, she looked him dead in the eye and said the words that would change everything. "This is purely business, nothing more." But some lies are too big to keep, and some families are too real to fake. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all started. A broken down garage in Blackwood Ridge during the coldest winter anyone could remember. The heater in Logan Carter's garage had been dead for 2 weeks, and he couldn't afford to fix it. Ironic, considering he fixed things for a living. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed and flickered while he worked on the undercarriage of a rusted Chevy Silverado, his breath fogging in the frigid air. His hands were numb even through the work gloves, fingers stiff as he wrestled with a stripped bolt that absolutely refused to budge. "Dad?" Logan rolled out from under the truck to find Mia standing in the doorway between the garage and their tiny back office. She was bundled in her purple winter coat, the one that was getting too small but would have to last another season because there wasn't money for a new one. Her dark hair was pulled into 2 uneven pigtails that he'd attempted that morning. He was getting better at them, but he'd never matched the way Sarah used to do them before the cancer took her 3 years ago. "Hey, baby girl, what's up?" Mia held up her math homework, already completed. "I'm done. Can we go home soon? It's really cold." Logan glanced at the clock mounted on the wall. 4:30. He had another job lined up at 5. A brake replacement on an old Honda that the owner had already pushed off twice. He needed that money. The rent was due in 5 days and he was $800 short. Not to mention the hospital had called again yesterday about Mia's blood work from last month. Apparently, her anemia was getting worse, and they wanted to run more tests. Tests that cost money he absolutely didn't have. "Another hour, okay? Then we'll grab burgers on the way home." Mia's face lit up despite the cold. "McDonald's? Don't push your luck. The place on 5th with the good fries." She grinned and disappeared back into the office where she'd set up her homework station on the battered metal desk. Logan had dragged a space heater in there for her, the only one still working. She got the heat. He'd manage. He slid back under the truck, positioned the wrench, and pulled hard. The bolt finally gave with a screech of metal on metal that probably meant he'd stripped it worse. But at least it was moving. Small victories. The sound of vehicles pulling up outside barely registered at first. Blackwood Ridge wasn't exactly a high-traffic area, especially not this part of town where the buildings were mostly abandoned warehouses and failing businesses. But then he heard car doors opening, multiple car doors, and expensive ones, from the sound of it, that solid, heavy thunk that cheap cars never made. Logan rolled out again and stood, wiping his greasy hands on his already filthy jeans. Through the half-open garage door, he could see 3 black SUVs parked in a neat line on the street. Not just any SUVs, Range Rovers. Brand new ones, still gleaming despite the road salt and slush. What the hell? A driver emerged from the first vehicle and opened the rear passenger door. Logan watched as a woman stepped out, and his brain sort of stuttered trying to process what he was seeing. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Maybe 30 years old, wearing a long black wool coat that probably cost more than his truck, heels that had no business being worn in 3 inches of snow, and carrying herself with the kind of posture that said she'd never doubted herself a day in her life. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek style that looked effortless, but probably took an hour to achieve. Even from 20 feet away, Logan could tell she was beautiful in that intimidating, untouchable way that made normal people instinctively step back. She walked directly toward his garage like she owned the street. Maybe she did. He wouldn't be surprised. "Are you Logan Carter?" Her voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of voice used to giving orders and having them followed. "That's me. Can I help you?" She stopped just inside the garage entrance, her eyes sweeping across the cramped space with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not disgust exactly, more like she was cataloging everything, filing it away for later analysis. "My name is Vivian Sinclair. I have a business proposition for you." Logan had heard that name before. Everyone in the region had. Sinclair Industries, real estate, tech investments, manufacturing. One of those sprawling corporate empires that seemed to have fingers in everything. He'd seen her face on the business section of newspapers, always looking composed and in control. What the hell was she doing in his garage? I think you've got the wrong guy. I fix cars, not computers. Ush. B-O-O-T. I'm aware of what you do. Vivian glanced toward the office where Mia was visible through the window, hunched over her homework. You're also a single father. Your daughter is 8 years old. Her name is Mia. She has a chronic medical condition that requires regular monitoring and treatment that you're currently unable to afford. Every muscle in Logan's body went tense. How the hell do you know that? I make it my business to know things. Vivian's expression didn't change. Your lease on this property expires in 6 months, and based on your current financial situation, you won't be able to renew it. You're 3 months behind on your apartment rent. Your truck needs a new transmission, but you've been putting it off because you can't afford the parts. Should I continue? Logan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to leave. Now. I'm not playing a game, Mr. Carter. I'm offering you a solution. I don't need $700,000. Logan's words died in his throat. Vivian continued, her tone completely businesslike, like she was discussing the weather instead of an amount of money that would change his entire life. That's what I'm prepared to pay you. In exchange, I need you to marry me. For a long moment, Logan just stared at her, convinced he'd misheard. What? It's a legal arrangement, nothing more. I need a husband on paper for personal reasons I'll explain if you're interested in hearing more. The marriage would last for 1 year, possibly 2 depending on circumstances. You would maintain your independence, continue running your business if you wish, and at the end of the arrangement, we would divorce amicably. In addition to the initial payment, you would receive full medical coverage for you and your daughter during the marriage, housing if needed, and a monthly stipend of $20,000. Logan's mind was reeling. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. This is insane. This is business. Vivian pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward him. I had my legal team draw up a preliminary contract. Obviously, you're welcome to have your own attorney review it before signing, though I understand that may present a financial challenge. I'm prepared to advance you money for legal consultation if needed. He didn't take the phone. Why me? You're a billionaire. You could hire anyone, someone from your world who understands how this works. Because I don't want someone from my world. For the first time, something flickered in Vivian's perfectly controlled expression. I need someone real. Someone with no connections to my business or social circles. Someone with their own reasons for accepting this arrangement, which makes them less likely to complicate matters with unrealistic expectations. You mean someone desperate enough to say yes, if you prefer that phrasing. Logan turned away from her, running his hands through his hair. This was crazy, absolutely crazy. You didn't just marry a stranger for money. That was the plot of a bad romance novel, not real life. But $700,000. He could pay off every debt he had, put money aside for Mia's medical care. Maybe even buy this building instead of renting, turn the garage into something that could actually make a profit. She'd have stability, security, things he'd been trying and failing to provide for years. Why do you need a husband? He asked the question without looking at her. I have a daughter. Her name is Chloe. She's 7 years old. Vivian's voice remained steady, but there was something underneath it now. Something almost human. My husband died 2 years ago in a car accident. His family has been attempting to gain custody of Chloe ever since. They believe I'm an unfit mother because I work too much, because I prioritize my career over traditional family values. They've hired attorneys, social workers, experts. The case has been ongoing for 18 months. And a husband makes you look more fit? A stable family environment makes me look more fit. A judge is more likely to rule in favor of a 2-parent household. My lawyers believe this could be the deciding factor. Logan finally turned back to face her. So you're asking me to lie to a court? I'm asking you to participate in a legal marriage that happens to serve a strategic purpose. How we present that marriage is a matter of framing. That's a nice way of saying lie. Vivian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm trying to keep my daughter, Mr. Carter. I'm using every legal option available to me. If you find that morally objectionable, I understand, but I'm not apologizing for it. And what happens to your daughter when we get divorced in a year? Won't that make you look unstable all over again? By then, the custody case will be resolved. Her grandparents are elderly. Their lawyers are pushing for a quick decision because they know time isn't on their side. Once I have full legal custody, a subsequent divorce won't provide grounds to revisit the matter. It was all so calculated, so cold. Logan thought about Mia in the other room, doing homework in her too small coat because he couldn't keep the damn garage heated. He thought about the hospital bills stacked on his kitchen counter, the eviction notice, the transmission in his truck that was going to fail completely any day now. I need to think about it. I need an answer by tomorrow morning. Vivian pulled a business card from her coat pocket and held it out. My personal number is on the back. Call me before 8 a.m. If I don't hear from you, I'll assume the answer is no and pursue other options. Logan took the card. The paper was heavy, expensive, embossed lettering. Of course it was. This is really what you want? A fake marriage to a guy you don't know? What I want is my daughter. Vivian's eyes met his directly for the first time, and he saw something fierce there beneath all that control. Everything else is just logistics. She turned and walked back to her SUV without another word. Logan stood in the garage entrance and watched the convoy pull away, their red taillights disappearing into the early winter darkness. Dad? Mia appeared at his elbow. Who was that lady? Logan looked down at the business card in his hand, at the phone number written in neat handwriting on the back. Someone with a problem. Can you fix it? He thought about Vivian Sinclair's expression when she talked about her daughter, that flash of something real beneath all the corporate polish. I don't know, baby. I really don't know. That night, after a mostly silent dinner of burgers and fries that Mia ate with enthusiastic disregard for table manners, Logan sat at his kitchen table with the business card in front of him. Their apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms in a building that had seen better days about 40 years ago. The radiator clanked and hissed, producing more noise than heat. He could hear their neighbor's television through the thin walls. Mia was already in bed, exhausted from the day. She'd been tired a lot lately. The anemia, the doctor said. Nothing to panic about yet, but something to monitor. More tests. More appointments. More money he didn't have. Logan picked up his phone and Googled Vivian Sinclair. The search results were extensive. Articles about Sinclair Industries' latest acquisition. A profile in Forbes about her unconventional rise to CEO. Pictures from charity galas where she stood next to other wealthy, important-looking people, always with that same controlled expression. He found articles about her husband's death, too. Harrison Sinclair III, killed when his Tesla crashed into a barrier during a rainstorm. The accident investigation ruled it a tragic result of weather conditions and speed. No foul play suspected. He'd been 42 years old. The custody battle was messier. The articles about that were fewer, more carefully worded. Rich people knew how to keep things out of the press, but the basic facts were there. Harrison's parents had filed for custody 6 months after his death, citing Vivian's inability to provide a stable home environment and prioritization of corporate interests over maternal duties. In one article, there was a quote from their attorney. Mrs. Sinclair is rarely home. The child is raised primarily by staff. This is not a healthy environment for a young girl who has already suffered the trauma of losing her father. Logan found one photo of Chloe, taken at what looked like a school event. She was small for 7, with dark curly hair and her mother's serious eyes. She wasn't smiling in the picture. He closed his phone and rubbed his eyes. The apartment was quiet except for the radiator and the distant sound of traffic on the street below. $700,000. He thought about what Sarah would say. She'd probably tell him he was crazy for even considering it. But Sarah had also been practical when she needed to be. Toward the end, when the medical bills were piling up and they'd already lost the house they'd been saving for, she'd told him more than once to do whatever it took to take care of Mia. Whatever it took. The business card sat on the table like an accusation. At 11:43 p.m., Logan picked up his phone and dialed the number on the back. Vivian answered on the second ring. Mr. Carter, I have conditions. There was a pause. Then, I'm listening. Mia can't know this isn't real. As far as she's concerned, this is a normal marriage. I'm not going to lie to her directly, but I'm not explaining the business arrangement either. She's 8. She doesn't need that confusion. Agreed. I want it in writing that her medical care is covered completely. No limits, no exceptions, whatever she needs. Done. And I'm not moving into some mansion and playing house full time. I have a business. I have a life. We figure out how to make this look real without me giving up everything. We can negotiate the details. Vivian's voice was all business again. Anything else? Logan looked around his shabby apartment, at the water stain on the ceiling he kept meaning to fix, at the furniture they'd bought secondhand when they moved in. Yeah, one more thing. When this is over, when we get divorced or whatever, you leave Mia alone. You're not part of her life after that. I don't want her getting attached to someone who's just going to disappear. The silence on the other end of the line stretched longer this time. Understood, Vivian finally said. Then I guess we have the deal. My attorney will contact you tomorrow morning to begin the paperwork. We'll need to move quickly. The next custody hearing is in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? You want to be married in 6 weeks? I want to be married in 6 days. Vivian's tone left no room for argument. The hearing timeline doesn't give us the luxury of a lengthy engagement. Logan's head was spinning. 6 days. He was going to be married in 6 days to a woman he'd met for 10 minutes in his garage. Okay, 6 days. I'll have my team handle the arrangements. Courthouse ceremony, nothing elaborate. We can discuss the logistics tomorrow. Right, logistics. Get some sleep, Mr. Carter. We have a lot of work to do. She hung up without saying goodbye. Logan sat at his kitchen table for a long time after that, staring at nothing. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. A car alarm went off outside and then fell silent. He'd just agreed to marry a billionaire. What the hell had he done? Kim. The next 5 days passed in a blur of paperwork, meetings, and phone calls that all felt surreal. Vivian's legal team was ruthlessly efficient. They had Logan sign documents, review clauses, initial amendments. Everything was spelled out in excruciating detail. The duration of the marriage, the financial arrangements, the conditions for divorce, the non-disclosure agreements. This is standard, one of the attorneys kept saying, a thin man with expensive glasses who spoke like he was reading from a script. We just need to protect all parties involved. Logan barely understood half of what he was signing. He'd taken Vivian up on her offer to hire his own attorney, and the guy he'd found, recommended by a friend of a friend, had at least confirmed that the contract wasn't actively screwing him over. It's unusual, his lawyer had admitted, a weathered guy named Frank who'd practiced family law for 30 years. But it's legal, and honestly, the terms are generous. She's offering you a lot of protection here. Why would she do that? Frank had shrugged. Maybe she's not as cold as she seems, or maybe she just wants this done right. Logan had told Mia on the second day. That had been harder than signing any contract. They'd been eating breakfast, cereal because he'd forgotten to go grocery shopping again, when he'd sat down across from her and tried to figure out how to explain that their entire life was about to change. Hey kiddo, I need to talk to you about something. Mia had looked up from her bowl, milk dripping off her spoon. Am I in trouble? What? No, you're not in trouble. He'd taken a breath. I met someone, a woman. Her name is Vivian. Mia's eyes had gone wide. Like a girlfriend? Sort of. Actually, it's more serious than that. We're getting married. The spoon had clattered back into the bowl. Married? Like, married? Yeah. When did you meet her? Recently. It's been fast. I know that sounds crazy. Mia had processed this with the strange adaptability of children. Is she nice? Logan had hesitated. Nice wasn't the word he'd use for Vivian Sinclair. She's different from anyone I've known before, but she has a daughter your age. Her name is Chloe. I'm getting a sister? Kind of. Not exactly, but you'll be living in the same house sometimes. Are we moving? Sort of. It's complicated, Mia, but I promise you're going to be okay. Better than okay. This is going to help us. With your doctors. With everything. Mia had looked at him with those two serious eyes that reminded him she'd already dealt with more hardship than most kids her age, losing her mother, watching her father struggle, being sick without fully understanding why. "Okay, Dad. If you think it's good, then okay." The trust in her voice had nearly broken him. The courthouse ceremony was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. Vivian had arranged everything with the same ruthless efficiency she seemed to apply to her entire life. No guests, no flowers, just the bare minimum required by law. Logan had worn the one suit he owned, purchased years ago for Sarah's funeral and not touched since. It still fit, barely. Mia wore a purple dress they'd bought at Target the day before, and she'd been so excited about it that Logan had nearly called the whole thing off right there in the store. This was wrong. He was lying to his daughter. He was marrying someone for money. But then the cashier had rung them up, $47 for the dress and a pair of shoes, and he'd thought about the hospital bill sitting at home, $12,000 for the last round of tests. The insurance had covered some, but their deductible was astronomical. He'd handed over his credit card. They met Vivian at the courthouse steps. She was already there, standing next to a black town car, looking impossibly polished in a cream-colored dress and heels. Next to her stood a little girl in a dark blue dress who had to be Chloe. The girl was small, delicate-looking, with curly dark hair pulled back with a headband. She stood very still, her hand in her mother's, and watched Logan and Mia approach with solemn eyes. "Mr. Carter." "Mia." Vivian's greeting was formal, controlled. "This is my daughter, Chloe." "Hi," Mia said immediately, because Mia was never shy. "I like your dress." Chloe glanced down at her outfit like she'd forgotten she was wearing it. "Thank you," she whispered. "Want to be friends?" The question seemed to catch Chloe off guard. She looked up at her mother, uncertain. "That would be nice," Vivian said, and something in her voice was gentler than Logan had heard before. Inside, the ceremony was perfunctory. A judge who looked like she performed 10 of these a day read through the standard vows without much inflection. Logan repeated words that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Vivian did the same, her voice steady and clear. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Vivian extended her hand for a handshake. Logan looked at her hand, then at her face, and felt the absurdity of the moment crash over him. They were married. He was married to this stranger who was looking at him like they'd just concluded a business deal, which, he supposed, they had. He shook her hand. Mia clapped anyway, because she thought this was real. The conversation about living arrangements had happened 2 days before the wedding in Vivian's downtown office. Logan had never been in a space like it before. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that probably cost more than his annual income, art on the walls that looked important in a way he couldn't quite define. Vivian had sat behind a massive desk, perfectly composed, while Logan had tried not to feel like he was attending a job interview. "The custody evaluators will expect us to be living together," Vivian had said, "at least part of the time. I'm not asking you to give up your apartment, but we need to establish a primary residence where both families are present. Your place, I'm guessing. The estate has more than enough room, 14 bedrooms, separate wings. You and Mia could have your own space. You'd barely notice anyone else was there if you didn't want to." 14 bedrooms. Logan had tried to imagine that and failed. "Mia's in school. Her friends are here. There's an excellent private school 15 minutes from the estate. I can have her enrolled immediately. I don't want her in some stuck-up rich kid's school." Vivian's expression had tightened almost imperceptibly. "The school has an exceptional special education program, including staff trained to work with students who have chronic health conditions. The student-to-teacher ratio is 8-to-1. They have a full-time nurse on campus." Logan had opened his mouth to argue and then closed it again. "I don't want to uproot her completely," he'd said instead. "Then don't. We'll arrange transportation so she can still see her friends. She can stay at your apartment on weekends if that makes this easier. I'm trying to be flexible here, Mr. Carter." "You don't seem like someone who does flexible very well." The corner of Vivian's mouth had twitched, almost a smile. "Not quite. I'm learning." They moved in 3 days after the wedding. Logan had tried to prepare Mia for how big Vivian's house was, But there was really no way to prepare someone for 14 bedrooms and an actual wine cellar and a hallway lined with paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum. The estate sat on 40 acres outside the city limits, surrounded by iron gates and tall trees. The driveway was longer than the street Logan had grown up on. The house itself looked like something from a movie, all stone and tall windows and architecture that probably had a name he didn't know. "Holy crap," Logan had muttered when the gate swung open. "Language," Mia had chirped from the back seat, but she'd been pressed against the window, eyes enormous. A woman was waiting for them at the front entrance, older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a neat bun, and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by much. "Mr. Carter, Mia, I'm Mrs. Chen, the house manager. Mrs. Sinclair asked me to show you to your rooms." Mrs. Sinclair. Right. That was Vivian now. Inside was even more overwhelming. Marble floors, a staircase that split in two directions, chandeliers that looked like they could kill someone if they fell. Everything was pristine, perfect, and absolutely sterile. "Where's Chloe?" Mia asked, craning her neck to look around. "Miss Chloe is with her tutor until 4, Mrs. Chen said. "She'll join you for dinner." "She has a tutor?" "For piano. She also has lessons for French, mathematics, and horseback riding on various days." Mia looked at Logan with an expression that said she wasn't sure whether that sounded amazing or horrifying. Their rooms were in the east wing, not just a bedroom, a whole suite. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting room. Mia got her own room across the hall, similarly enormous. There was a connected playroom that had clearly been prepared for her arrival, filled with toys and books that were all brand new. "This is insane," Logan said to the empty room after Mrs. Chen had left them to settle in. He walked to the window. The view looked out over gardens that were currently snow-covered but probably looked incredible in summer. He could see the edge of what might be a pool house in the distance. Maybe stables, if the horse riding thing was real. This was Vivian's world. This was where she'd raised Chloe, where she came home after running her empire. It felt about as warm as a hotel. Logan unpacked his single suitcase of clothes and hung them in a closet that was bigger than his bedroom at the apartment. The clothes looked pathetic in there, lost in all that space. Mia appeared in the doorway. "Dad, my bathroom has 2 sinks. Why would one person need 2 sinks?" "I have no idea, baby. And the shower is huge. Like, you could fit 5 people in there." "Please don't test that theory." She grinned at him, then her expression got more serious. "Are we really going to live here?" "For now. Is that okay?" Mia looked around the room, taking it all in. "It's kind of scary." "It's so big." Yeah, it is. But Vivian seems nice, and Chloe probably needs a friend." Logan pulled Mia into a hug, pressing his face into her hair. 8 years old, and she was already trying to make the best of a situation she didn't fully understand, trying to find the good in it. "You're a better person than me, kiddo." "I know," she said matter-of-factly, and he laughed despite everything. Dinner that first night was excruciating. They ate in a formal dining room at a table that could easily seat 20 people. The 4 of them clustered at one end while 2 members of the staff, because apparently Vivian had staff who served dinner, brought out courses that Logan couldn't identify. Vivian sat at the head of the table, perfectly postured, and made polite conversation that felt like something from a script. "How was the move?" "Fine. Easy. The school enrollment is complete. Mia can start on Monday if that works." "Sure. Yeah." Chloe sat next to her mother, eating tiny bites and saying nothing. Mia tried a few times to engage her, asking about her tutor, about the horse riding, about what games she liked. But every answer was barely more than a whisper. "Chloe struggles with new situations," Vivian said quietly during a lull in the conversation. "She needs time to adjust." Logan looked at the little girl, at the way she kept her eyes on her plate and her shoulders slightly hunched, and recognized something in that posture. The protective curl of a kid who'd learned not to expect good things. He knew that posture. He'd seen it in Mia right after Sarah died. "That's okay," Logan said, directing the words to Chloe, even though she didn't look up. "Nobody's rushing you. You talk when you're ready." Chloe's fork paused for just a second before she resumed eating. After dinner, Vivian excused herself to take a business call. Chloe disappeared upstairs with Mrs. Chen. Logan and Mia were left standing in the enormous entrance hall, feeling utterly lost. "Want to watch a movie?" Logan suggested. "Where?" "Good question. This place probably had a theater room or something equally ridiculous." They eventually found a sitting room with a television and settled onto a couch that was more comfortable than any piece of furniture Logan had ever owned. Mia curled up against his side, and they watched some animated movie she'd seen a dozen times, her quiet commentary filling the silence. Around 9, Vivian appeared in the doorway. She'd changed out of her work clothes into slacks and a simple sweater, her hair down for the first time since Logan had met her. She looked younger like that, more human. "I'm heading to bed," she said. "Early meeting tomorrow. Mrs. Chen can help with anything you need." "We're good." Vivian hesitated, and for a moment Logan thought she might say something else, but then she just nodded and disappeared again. "She's not very fun, is she?" Mia whispered. Logan bit back a laugh. "She's just used to being alone, I think." "That's sad." "Yeah, it is." That night, Logan lay in a bed that was too soft and stared at a ceiling that was too high and wondered what the hell he was supposed to do now. He'd married a woman he didn't know, moved into a house that felt like a museum, dragged Mia into a lie that was supposed to help them both but mostly just felt wrong. Somewhere in this enormous house, Vivian was probably lying awake in her own expensive bed, thinking about custody hearings and corporate strategies and whatever else billionaires thought about. And in another room, 2 little girls were sleeping, unaware that the family they thought they'd joined was just a carefully constructed fiction. Logan closed his eyes and tried not to think about what happened when fictions fell apart. The first week in the Sinclair estate felt like living in a museum where someone had forgotten to post the rules. Logan kept waiting for someone to tell him he was doing everything wrong, touching things he shouldn't, existing in spaces that weren't meant for people like him. But nobody said anything. The staff moved through the house like ghosts, appearing when needed and vanishing the moment their tasks were complete. Mia adapted faster than he did, the way kids always seem to. By the 3rd day, she'd mapped out her favorite rooms and claimed a window seat in the library as her reading spot. She'd also decided that her mission in life was to make Chloe Sinclair smile, a goal that was proving more difficult than either of them had anticipated. Chloe was polite, painfully so. She said please and thank you and excuse me with the mechanical precision of someone who'd been drilled on manners since birth. But she didn't play, didn't laugh, barely spoke unless directly asked a question. She went through her days like she was following a schedule only she could see. Tutors at specific times, meals eaten with perfect posture, bedtime at exactly 8:30. Does she ever just, run around? Mia asked Logan one morning while they ate breakfast in the smaller dining room. The formal one had been silently retired after that first awkward dinner, and now they ate in what Mrs. Chen called the breakfast nook, though it was still bigger than Logan's entire apartment kitchen. "I don't know, baby. Maybe she's just shy." "I don't think it's shy. I think it's sad." Logan looked across the table at his daughter, at her too serious expression, and felt that familiar ache in his chest. Mia had learned to read sadness early. She'd had to. Vivian appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work in a sharp gray suit, her hair pulled back, phone in hand. She'd been at the house for breakfast exactly twice since they'd moved in. Usually she was gone before they woke up. "Good morning." Her greeting was automatic, her attention still on whatever email she was reading. "Morning," Logan replied. Vivian glanced up, seemed to register that Mia was staring at her with open curiosity, and slipped her phone into her pocket. "How's the new school, Mia?" "It's okay. The kids are kind of weird." "Weird how?" "They all have fancy lunches, like one girl had sushi for lunch." "Who eats sushi for lunch?" And the corner of Vivian's mouth twitched. "Apparently people at your new school." "It's weird," Mia insisted. "But the library's really good. They have this whole section on space and planets and stuff." "You like space?" "She wants to be an astronaut," Logan said. "This week, anyway. Last month it was marine biologist." "I can be both," Mia said with the absolute certainty of an 8-year-old. "I'll study fish in space." This time Vivian actually smiled. It was small, brief, but real. "That sounds like a solid plan." Chloe drifted into the room then, already dressed in her school uniform, her hair in perfect braids that Mrs. Chen had probably done. She slid into her chair without a word and started eating the breakfast that had been set out for her. "How are your piano lessons going?" Vivian asked her daughter. "Fine. Mrs. Patterson said you're making excellent progress on the Chopin piece." "Okay, sit." Vivian's expression flickered with something Logan was starting to recognize, frustration mixed with resignation. She was trying, but the conversation had nowhere to go when Chloe gave nothing back. "I'm going to be late tonight," Vivian said, directing this to Logan like he was supposed to do something with that information. "Board meeting. Don't wait dinner for me." "We never do," he pointed out, and immediately regretted it when her jaw tightened. "Right, well, I'll see you all later." She left, heels clicking on the marble floor, and the breakfast nook felt simultaneously more relaxed and more empty. "Does your mom work a lot?" Mia asked Chloe. Chloe nodded, still focused on her eggs. "My dad works a lot too. Well, he used to. Now he's here more." Logan caught himself before saying that he'd love to be working, but had no idea what his role was supposed to be in this arrangement. Vivian had told him to keep the garage running if he wanted, but the commute was over an hour each way, and he couldn't leave Mia alone in this massive house all day. So the garage sat mostly empty while his part-time employee handled the few jobs that came in, and Logan felt increasingly useless. "Want to play after school today?" Mia tried again. Chloe finally looked up, her dark eyes meeting Mia's briefly before skittering away. "I have French lessons." "After that?" "Then it's dinner time." "After dinner?" "I have to practice piano." Mia's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "What about weekends?" "I have writing lessons on Saturday mornings, math tutoring Saturday afternoons. Sunday is for homework and reading." Logan felt something cold settle in his stomach. That wasn't a kid's schedule. That was a prison sentence. "What if you just said no to one of those things?" Mia suggested. "Then we could hang out." Chloe looked genuinely confused by the concept. "I can't say no." "Why not?" "Because it's my schedule." "But who made the schedule?" "My mother. So ask her to change it." Chloe's expression closed down entirely. She went back to her breakfast, and Logan could see the conversation was over. Mia looked at him, disappointed and bewildered, and he had no idea what to tell her. Later, after both girls had been driven to their respective schools by Patrick, the driver who apparently came with the estate, Logan found himself wandering the house like a ghost haunting someone else's life. He ended up in the garage, which housed a collection of vehicles that probably cost more than most people's houses. A vintage Porsche, a Tesla, a Range Rover identical to the ones Vivian's security team drove, and in the corner, covered with a tarp, something that made Logan stop in his tracks. He pulled back the cover to reveal a 1967 Mustang Fastback in cherry red. The body was pristine, clearly maintained with obsessive care, but when Logan popped the hood, he could see immediately that the engine was a mess. Someone had started a restoration and given up halfway through. That was Harrison's project. Logan jerked around to find Mrs. Chen standing in the garage doorway. "Sorry, I wasn't snooping, just looking around." "You're not snooping. It's your house now too, Mr. Carter." "Logan, please, Mr. Carter makes me sound like my dad." Mrs. Chen's expression softened fractionally. "Harrison bought that car the year before he died. Kept saying he was going to restore it, take Chloe for rides when it was finished. He never got very far." Logan looked back at the Mustang. "It's a good car. Just needs someone who knows what they're doing." "Do you?" "Know what I'm doing? With cars, yeah. With the rest of this?" He gestured vaguely at the mansion around them. "Not so much." Mrs. Chen studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You're different than I expected." "Different how?" "More normal. I thought you'd be—" She paused, clearly editing herself. "Never mind what I thought. You thought I'd be some gold digger marrying Vivian for her money." The thought crossed my mind. "Us. Well, you're half right. I am marrying her for the money, but I'm not pretending otherwise, at least not to myself." Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's honest. I'm not good at lying. Makes this whole situation pretty uncomfortable, if I'm being real with you." Mrs. Sinclair isn't good at lying either, despite what people think. She's just good at not showing what she feels. Logan closed the Mustang's hood carefully. "Can I ask you something? What's the deal with Chloe's schedule, all those lessons and tutors? Is that normal? Mrs. Chen's expression went carefully neutral. That's not really my place to say. I'm not asking you to trash talk your boss. I'm trying to understand, because that kid seems miserable. For a long moment, Mrs. Chen didn't respond. Then she sighed and suddenly looked older. After Mr. Harrison died, Chloe stopped talking almost entirely. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. The doctor said it was trauma, grief, that she needed time in therapy. Mrs. Sinclair tried therapy, tried everything, but Chloe just disappeared inside herself. And the solution was to pack her schedule until she couldn't think. The solution was to give her structure, routine, something predictable when everything else in her world had fallen apart. Mrs. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. You don't know what it was like. Mrs. Sinclair was drowning. The company was in chaos because Harrison had handled certain divisions and they collapsed without him. The custody battle started. Chloe was falling apart. Mrs. Sinclair did what she thought would help. Logan felt like an asshole. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to... You were trying to advocate for a child you barely know. That's not a bad instinct, Logan. Just remember there's more to the story than what you're seeing. She left him alone in the garage with the Mustang and a growing understanding that he'd walked into something far more complicated than a simple business arrangement. That night, Vivian actually made it home for dinner. She looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that came from too many hours and too much stress. But she sat at the table and asked the girls about their days with what seemed like genuine interest. Chloe gave her usual one-word answers. Mia, by contrast, launched into an enthusiastic description of a science experiment involving vinegar and baking soda that had apparently gone slightly wrong and resulted in foam everywhere. The teacher wasn't even mad, Mia said, her eyes bright with the memory. She just laughed and said that's what learning looks like sometimes. Sounds like a good teacher, Vivian said. She's the best. Way better than my old school. Logan caught Vivian's quick glance at him, saw something almost like relief there. At least one thing was going right. After dinner, Chloe disappeared upstairs to practice piano. The distant sound of scales drifted through the house, mechanical and joyless. She's really good, Mia said, listening. But it sounds sad. Music's not supposed to sound sad like that. Vivian, who'd been gathering her briefcase to retreat to her study, stopped. What do you mean? I don't know. It's just, it sounds like she doesn't like it. Like she's doing it because she has to, not because she wants to. She's never complained about her lessons. Because Chloe doesn't complain about anything, Logan said quietly. That's kind of the problem. Vivian's expression went carefully blank. I'm doing what's best for her. I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying maybe she needs less structure and more, but he trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence without starting a fight. More what? More kid time. Time to just be 8 years old without a schedule. She's 7. Even worse then. Vivian's grip on her briefcase tightened. You've been here a week, Logan. Don't presume to tell me how to raise my daughter. I'm not trying to, I have work to do. Excuse me. She left, and Logan was reminded sharply that this wasn't a real marriage and Vivian wasn't interested in his parenting opinions. You made her mad, Mia observed. Yeah, I noticed. But you're right, Chloe needs to play more. Logan pulled Mia into a hug. The world would be at a better place if more people listened to 8-year-old girls. Obviously, Mia said, and he laughed despite the tension. The weather turned colder as November bled into December. The estate looked like something from a Christmas card with snow covering the grounds, icicles hanging from the eaves, everything pristine and frozen. Logan had never lived somewhere that looked this perfect. It made him nervous, like he was going to break something just by existing in it. Mia's health had improved, which was the one unambiguously good thing about the whole arrangement. Regular appointments with actual specialists, medications that were no longer rationed, a nutritionist who'd designed a meal plan that Mrs. Chen implemented flawlessly. The dark circles under Mia's eyes had faded. She had more energy. She was thriving in a way Logan hadn't seen since before Sarah got sick. That alone made the weirdness worth it. The custody evaluation happened 3 weeks after they'd moved in. A social worker named Ms. Patterson arrived with a clipboard and a professional smile and spent 4 hours observing their family dynamic. Logan had been dreading it, certain he'd mess up somehow, say the wrong thing, make it obvious this was all fake. But Vivian had coached him beforehand, sitting across from him in her study with a list of potential questions and appropriate responses. Just be yourself, she'd said, but the version of yourself that's happily married. What does that look like? I have no idea. I was never happily married. The honesty had startled him. You and Harrison weren't happy? We were compatible. We had similar goals, complementary skill sets. Happy is something else. That's depressing. That's realistic. Ugh. Ms. Patterson asked questions that felt like traps. How did they meet? How long had they known each other before deciding to marry? What made them compatible as partners? Logan had stuck to the script they'd agreed on. They'd met through mutual friends, connected quickly over shared values about family and commitment, decided life was too short to wait when you found the right person. It wasn't entirely a lie. The timeline was compressed and the motivations were fabricated, but the basic facts existed. Watching Vivian lie smoothly and convincingly had been unsettling. She was good at it. Too good. It made Logan wonder what else she was good at pretending. Ms. Patterson had observed them during dinner, watched Chloe and Mia interact, toured the house, and asked Chloe gentle questions about whether she felt safe and happy. Chloe had answered with her usual quiet politeness. Yes, she felt safe. Yes, she liked having Mia here. Yes, her mother took good care of her. After Ms. Patterson left, Vivian had disappeared into her study without a word. Logan found her there an hour later, standing at the window with a glass of wine, staring out at the snow-covered grounds. I think it went okay, he offered. You don't know that. She seemed satisfied. She's a professional evaluator. Her job is not to seem anything. Logan had walked further into the room. The study was the most personal space he'd seen in the house. Bookshelves filled with actual books that looked read, a few photographs on the desk, a throw blanket draped over the leather couch like someone actually used it. You're terrified of losing her, he said quietly. Vivian didn't turn around. Of course I am. She's my daughter. Then why do you act like you barely know her? Yes. That got her attention. Vivian turned, her expression sharp. Excuse me? I've been here 3 weeks. I've seen you have an actual conversation with Chloe maybe 4 times. The rest is just checking boxes. How was school? How were lessons? Good night. You're going through motions. I'm providing stability. You're providing distance. You have no right. You're right. I don't. But I'm going to say it anyway because someone needs to. Logan took a breath. That kid is lonely. She's got a schedule packed with activities, but no actual connection. She doesn't need more piano lessons. She needs her mom. Vivian's face had gone pale. I'm doing everything I can. Are you? Or are you doing what's comfortable for you? Get out of my study. Vivian, get out. Logan left. Spent the next hour feeling like garbage for attacking a woman who was clearly doing her best in an impossible situation. What did he know about raising kids while running a company and fighting for custody? Nothing. He knew nothing. But he also knew what lonely looked like on a kid's face, and Chloe wore it every single day. 2 days later, Logan came downstairs to find the breakfast nook empty, except for Mrs. Chen clearing plates. Where is everyone? Mrs. Sinclair took Chloe to school herself this morning, said something about wanting to have breakfast with her daughter. Logan felt something unexpected bloom in his chest. Logan felt something almost like hope. The weather got worse as December settled in. Blackwood Ridge was hit with a storm system that dumped 18 inches of snow overnight and knocked out power to half the county. The estate had backup generators, naturally, but Vivian had been at the office when the storm hit and the roads became impassable. She called around 7 p.m., her voice tight with frustration. I'm stuck at the office. The highways are closed. I might not make it home tonight. We're fine here, Logan assured her. Generators are running. Mrs. Chen made enough dinner to feed an army. The girls are good. Chloe has trouble sleeping during storms. I'll check on her. Logan, a pause. Thank you. It's fine, really. After he hung up, Logan found Chloe curled up in the library, staring out the window at the blowing snow, with wide, anxious eyes. She was gripping a stuffed rabbit that looked old and well-loved. "Hey, you doing okay?" She nodded, but her knuckles were white around the rabbit's ears. "Storms are pretty wild, huh?" Another nod. "You know what my dad used to do when I was scared of storms?" Chloe looked at him for the first time, curious despite herself. "He'd make hot chocolate and we'd build a fort out of blankets in the living room. Said if the storm couldn't see us, we couldn't see the storm." "That doesn't make sense." "Nope, but it made me feel better anyway." Mia appeared in the doorway. "Are we building a fort?" Logan hadn't actually been suggesting it, but the look on both girls' faces made the decision for him. Yeah, I guess we are." They dragged every blanket and pillow they could find into the main living room. Logan hauled in the cushions from the couches, built a framework using chairs and the coffee table, and draped sheets over the top. Mia directed the operation like a tiny general, declaring certain sections off-limits and others designated for specific purposes. Chloe watched for a while, uncertain. Then Mia grabbed her hand and pulled her inside the fort, and something shifted. Mrs. Chen brought them hot chocolate without being asked, and Logan caught her smile before she retreated. They sat inside the blanket fort while the storm howled outside, and Logan told them stories Sarah used to tell Mia. Silly stories about a princess who hated wearing shoes and a dragon who was afraid of mice. Stories that had no educational value and no deeper meaning beyond making kids laugh. Chloe laughed. It was small, almost hesitant, like she wasn't sure she was allowed, but it was real. Mia looked at Logan with an expression of pure triumph, and he had to fight back the urge to pull both girls into a hug. They fell asleep in the fort eventually, curled up together under a pile of blankets. Logan sat with his back against the couch and watched the snow fall beyond the windows, feeling the quiet settle around them like something tangible. He must have dozed off, because the next thing he knew, someone was gently shaking his shoulder. Vivian was crouched next to the fort, still in her work clothes but with snow in her hair and exhaustion written across her face. "The plows cleared the main roads," she whispered. "I made it back." Logan looked at the two sleeping girls, at the fort they'd built, at the empty hot chocolate mugs scattered around. "You built a blanket fort." "Yeah, in my living room." "Yeah, a trepam." He waited for her to be angry, to tell him this was inappropriate or unprofessional or not what she'd hired him for. Instead, Vivian sat down next to him, careful not to disturb the fort structure. She was close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that reminded him how different their worlds were. "She hasn't laughed like that since Harrison died," Vivian said quietly. "She just needed permission to be a kid. I don't know how to do this." The admission came out barely above a whisper. "I'm good at strategy, at business, at controlling variables and managing outcomes. But being a mother, actually connecting with her? I don't know how." Logan looked at her profile, at the woman who controlled a billion-dollar empire but couldn't figure out how to talk to her own daughter. "You're not supposed to manage her. You're supposed to love her." "I do love her. Then show her. Stop treating her like a project that needs optimization." Vivian closed her eyes. "What if I can't? What if I'm too broken to give her what she needs?" "Then you learn. You try. You mess up, and you try again." Logan kept his voice gentle. "That's what parenting is. None of us know what we're doing. We just love them enough to keep trying." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm outside and the quiet breathing of two sleeping children. When Vivian finally spoke again, her voice was steadier. "Tell me how. Tell me how to do this." So Logan did. He told her about the small moments that mattered, reading bedtime stories, asking real questions and actually listening to the answers, being present instead of perfect. He told her about the time Mia skinned her knee and cried, not because it hurt, but because she thought she'd ruined the new pants he'd bought her. About how sometimes kids needed you to just sit with them without trying to fix anything. Vivian listened, and somewhere during that long night while the storm raged and the girls slept in their blanket fort, something between them shifted. They weren't strangers anymore. Maybe not friends yet, but something closer to allies. When the sun came up, the world outside was transformed, everything buried under fresh snow, pristine and new. Mia woke first, disorienting herself in the fort before remembering where she was. Then Chloe stirred, and for the first time since Logan had met her, she didn't immediately retreat into herself. "Can we have breakfast in the fort?" Chloe asked, her voice small but hopeful. Vivian looked at Logan, and he could see her fighting against every instinct that said forts were messy and breakfast belonged at tables. "Sure," Vivian said, and was rewarded with Chloe's smile. "Why not?" Mrs. Chen brought them pancakes and fresh fruit, and they ate sitting cross-legged inside blankets while morning light filtered through the sheets. It was chaotic and imperfect and absolutely nothing like the formal structure Vivian had built her life around. And watching her daughter's face light up, Logan saw Vivian begin to understand what she'd been missing. The next few weeks brought small changes. Vivian started coming home for dinner more often. Not every night, her work wouldn't allow that, but enough that it became expected rather than surprising. She asked Chloe real questions and waited for real answers instead of accepting one-word responses. She learned to sit on the floor during playtime, to let Mia paint her nails ridiculous colors, to laugh when things didn't go according to plan. It was awkward at first, stilted, like watching someone learn a language they'd never been taught. But Chloe responded, opening up incrementally like a flower that had been kept too long in the dark. One evening, Logan found Vivian in Chloe's room reading a bedtime story. Actually reading, complete with different voices for different characters and exaggerated expressions that made Chloe giggle. She saw him in the doorway and paused, self-conscious. "Don't stop," he said. "You're doing great." After Chloe fell asleep, Vivian joined Logan in the kitchen where he was making himself a sandwich. The staff had gone home for the night, and the house felt almost normal in the quiet. "Thank you," Vivian said. "For what?" "For the fort. For calling me out when I needed it. For showing me it's okay to be imperfect." "Ooh, you're welcome. But you're doing the work. I'm just the guy who pointed out you needed to." Vivian pulled herself onto one of the counter stools, and Logan was struck by how young she looked with her hair down and no makeup, wearing yoga pants and an old sweatshirt instead of her armor of business suits. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Why did you really say yes? And don't tell me it was just the money. I know it was the money, but there had to be something else. Plenty of people wouldn't have agreed to this no matter how much I offered." Logan thought about lying, giving her something neat and simple, but they were past that now. "I was terrified of failing Mia the way I felt like I'd failed Sarah. When she got sick, I couldn't afford the best treatment. Couldn't give her experimental options. We lost our house paying for what I could afford. And in the end, it wasn't enough." He stared at the sandwich he wasn't hungry for anymore. "When you showed up offering a way to make sure Mia never had to worry about that? That I'd never have to watch her suffer because I couldn't pay for help? I would have sold my soul for that, not just my name on a marriage certificate. I'm sorry about your wife." "Me too." They sat in the quiet for a moment before Vivian spoke again. "Harrison's death wasn't an accident." Logan's head snapped up. "What?" "The official report says it was weather and speed. But I know Harrison. He was the most careful driver I've ever met, obsessive about safety. And he was driving home from meeting with the board, a meeting where he'd announced plans to restructure the company in ways his parents hated. She twisted her wedding ring, the one from her first marriage that she still wore. "I can't prove it. The police investigated and found nothing. But I know. And his parents know I know. That's why they're fighting for custody. Partly. They also genuinely believe I'm a terrible mother. They're not entirely wrong about that. I have been terrible at it." She looked at him. "But I'm trying to be better." "You are better. Chloe's already different than when I got here. Because of you. Because of Mia. Not because of me. Because you let us in. That's all you, Vivian." Something passed between them then. Something Logan couldn't quite name. Recognition, maybe. Understanding that they were both broken people trying their best with the pieces they had left. The moment stretched, and Logan became suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how quiet the house was, how the kitchen light made her eyes look almost warm instead of their usual ice. He stepped back. "I should get to bed. Early day tomorrow." If Vivian noticed the retreat, she didn't comment. "Good night, Logan." "Night." He left her sitting in the kitchen and tried not to think about how easy it would be to forget this was all pretend. December brought the kind of cold that made your bones ache, the kind where stepping outside felt like punishment. Logan had taken to spending his mornings in the garage working on Harrison's Mustang. He'd asked Vivian's permission first, half expecting her to say no, but she just looked at the covered car for a long moment before nodding. He would have wanted someone to finish it, she'd said, and that was that. The work gave Logan something to do besides feel like an expensive decoration in someone else's life. His hands knew engines, understood the logic of pistons and valves and timing belts. Out here, he wasn't pretending to be anything he wasn't. He was elbow deep in the carburetor one morning when Chloe appeared in the garage doorway. She was wearing her school uniform, backpack already on, but instead of heading to the car where Patrick waited, she stood watching him work. "You're going to be late," Logan said without looking up. "Patrick said we have 5 minutes. Then you've got 4 now." She didn't leave. Logan could feel her hovering, working up the courage to say whatever had brought her out here. He'd learned that pushing Chloe never worked. You had to wait her out. "My dad was going to teach me about cars," she finally said, her voice so quiet he almost missed it. Logan straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that was already beyond saving. "Yeah?" He said every person should know how to check their oil and change a tire, that it was important to understand how things work. Chloe took a tentative step into the garage. Chloe took a shititamte, but then he died, and nobody taught me. The simple matter-of-factness of it hit Logan harder than tears would have. This was how Chloe dealt with her grief, stated it plainly, and moved on before it could swallow her whole. "I could teach you," Logan offered, "if you want." "Really?" "Sure, but it means getting your hands dirty. Your mom might not love that. She said I should spend more time doing things I'm interested in instead of things I'm supposed to do." Chloe said it like she was quoting directly, testing the words to see if they were real. "Then I guess we're building you a different kind of lesson plan." For the first time since he'd met her, Chloe smiled at him without hesitation. It transformed her whole face, made her look exactly like what she was, a 7-year-old kid instead of a miniature adult. "Can Mia learn too?" "Absolutely. The more the merrier." Patrick honked the horn gently, his signal that time was up. Chloe hitched her backpack higher and started toward the car, but she paused in the doorway. "Logan?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for being here." She was gone before he could respond, leaving him standing in the garage with a wrench in his hand and an unexpected ache in his chest. When had he started caring about this kid? When had she stopped being part of the arrangement and started being real? That afternoon, Logan drove into town to pick up parts for the Mustang. The trip took him past his old garage, and on impulse, he pulled into the lot. The building looked smaller than he remembered, more run down. The paint was peeling worse than before. One of the bay doors was stuck half open. Marcus, his part-time guy, was inside working on a brake job. He looked up when Logan walked in, surprise crossing his face. "Boss man, thought you'd forgotten about this place." "Just been busy. How's business?" Marcus wiped his hands on his coveralls and shrugged. "Slow. Had a few regulars come by, but mostly it's been quiet. People heard you weren't around much and started going to Jensen's shop on the other side of town. Plus, Logan felt guilt settle heavy in his stomach. This place had been his dream once. The thing he'd built from nothing after Sarah died. The way he'd proved to himself he could still provide for Mia. And he'd walked away from it without a second thought the moment Vivian offered him an escape. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I should have been here more." "You got a new life now. Can't blame you for that." Marcus gestured at Logan's clothes. Nice jeans without holes, a coat that wasn't held together with duct tape, boots that actually fit properly. "Looks like it's treating you well." "It's complicated." Rich people problems usually are. There was no malice in it, just statement of fact. "You thinking about coming back?" Logan looked around at the garage, at the ancient calendar still turned to October, at the coffee maker that had been broken for 6 months, at the crack in the foundation they'd never had money to fix properly. "I don't know, maybe. I need to figure some things out first." "Well, whenever you decide I'm here, got nothing better going on anyway." They talked shop for a while, falling into the easy rhythm of two guys who understood engines better than people. It felt normal in a way nothing at the estate ever did. But when Logan finally left, climbing into the Range Rover that Vivian had casually mentioned he could use whenever he needed, the contrast was almost painful. He drove back to the estate in silence, trying to figure out who he was supposed to be now. Not the struggling garage owner anymore. Not really Vivian's husband, despite the legal documents. Not Chloe's father, even though he was starting to feel like something close to it. The identity crisis would have to wait, though, because when he pulled up to the house, there were two unfamiliar cars parked in the circular drive. Expensive sedans with rental plates. Logan found Vivian in her study, standing behind her desk like it was a barricade. Across from her sat two people who had to be Harrison's parents. The resemblance was there in the man's features. Same jawline, same aristocratic nose. The woman was thin and severe, her gray hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. "Logan?" Vivian's voice was carefully controlled, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "This is Harrison's mother and father, Margaret and Richard Sinclair. They stopped by unannounced to discuss the custody arrangement." "We have every right to visit our granddaughter," Margaret said, her tone making it clear she thought Vivian's comment was an attack. "I didn't say you didn't. I said you stopped by unannounced." Richard stood extending his hand to Logan with the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You must be the new husband. Quick courtship, from what we understand." Logan shook his hand, matching the too firm grip. "When you know, you know." "How convenient that you knew right before the custody hearing." "Richard." Vivian's voice had gone sharp. "If you have something to say it to me. Don't play games with Logan." "We're not playing games. We're concerned about our granddaughter's welfare. Surely you can understand that, given how concerned you apparently are about it yourself." Margaret's smile was poison wrapped in politeness. "Concerned enough to acquire a husband, anyway." "I married Logan because I love him. The timing is irrelevant." The lie came out so smoothly that Logan almost believed it himself. But he caught the slight tremor in Vivian's hand where it rested on the desk. "Where did you two meet?" Richard asked, directing the question at Logan. "Through mutual friends." "Which friends? Does it matter?" "We're simply trying to understand our new family member." "Surely that's reasonable." This was a test. They were looking for cracks in the story, inconsistencies they could use. Logan could feel the weight of Vivian's fear even though her expression remained neutral. "Look," Logan said, dropping the polite tone. "I get that you're worried about Chloe. That makes sense. She's your granddaughter, and you lost your son. But showing up here and interrogating us isn't helping anyone. You have a right to scheduled visitation, which Vivian has never denied you. What you don't have a right to is ambushing her in her own home and treating her like a criminal." Margaret's eyes went cold. "We're trying to protect that child from an unstable environment." "She's not unstable. She's grieving. There's a difference." "And you're an expert on grief counseling? What exactly are your qualifications, Mr. Carter?" "I'm a widower with a daughter who lost her mother. So yeah, I know a little bit about helping kids through loss." The room went very quiet. Vivian was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Margaret and Richard exchanged a glance that suggested they were recalculating their approach. "We didn't realize," Richard finally said, his tone slightly less hostile. "Our condolences." "Thanks. And I'm sorry about your son." "I really am. But coming after Vivian isn't going to bring him back." Margaret stood, gathering her purse with sharp, angry movements. "We'll be watching. The hearing is in 3 weeks. We suggest you both prepare to explain this sudden marriage to a judge." "We will," Vivian said. After they left, the study felt like the aftermath of a bomb. Vivian sank into her desk chair, all the rigid control draining out of her at once. She looked exhausted, defeated. "I'm sorry," Logan said. "I probably made that worse." "No, you made it better. They weren't expecting anyone to actually stand up to them." Vivian rubbed her temples. "They're going to come after us hard now. Investigate everything. They'll find out exactly how long we've known each other. We have a story. We stick to it. What if the story isn't enough? Then we make it better." Logan sat down across from her. "We make it real." "What does that mean?" It means we stop acting like roommates who happen to share a house. We actually look like a married couple. In public, at home, wherever. We sell this." Vivian studied him for a long moment. "You're talking about lying more convincingly. I'm talking about committing to the role. You wanted to protect Chloe. This is how we do it. And when it's over, When we get divorced and go back to our separate lives. Yes, sorry. Logan didn't have an answer for that. The question implied a clean break that felt less and less possible the longer he lived in this house. The more he watched Chloe smile, the deeper Mia settled into her new life. We'll figure it out when we get there, he said instead. Vivian looked like she wanted to argue, but then footsteps pounded down the hallway, and Mia burst into the study. Dad! Chloe's piano teacher says she's good enough to perform in the winter recital, but she doesn't want to and misses. Chen said you guys have to decide, and Chloe's really upset, and Mia paused for breath. Can you come talk to her? They found Chloe in her room, curled up on her bed with her stuffed rabbit clutched tight. Her piano teacher, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, stood nearby with her arms crossed. She has exceptional talent, the teacher was saying. It would be a waste not to showcase it. The winter recital is prestigious. Parents come from 3 counties. I don't want to, Chloe said, her voice muffled against the rabbit. Stage fright is normal, but you'll overcome it with practice. I don't want to practice. I don't want to perform. I don't want to play piano anymore. The teacher looked scandalized. Mrs. Sinclair, surely you're not going to allow this. We've been working toward this recital all semester. Vivian opened her mouth, and Logan could see her instinct kicking in, the need to smooth things over, to maintain the schedule, to keep everything running according to plan. But then she looked at her daughter's hunched shoulders, at the way Chloe was trying to disappear into herself, and something shifted in her expression. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Patterson, Vivian said quietly. We'll discuss this as a family and let you know our decision. But the recital can happen without Chloe if that's what she wants. The teacher left in a huff, muttering about wasted potential and disappointing decisions. After the door closed, Vivian sat on the bed next to Chloe. Do you really not want to play piano anymore? Chloe shook her head against the rabbit. Can you tell me why? Because I'm not good at it. Your teacher says you're very good, but I don't like it. And Daddy said I should only do things I like, not things I'm supposed to like. Chloe's voice cracked. He said that right before he died. And I forgot because everyone kept telling me I had to practice and had to get better and had to perform. But I hate it. I hate piano. Vivian looked stricken. I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me? Because you like that I play. You tell people about it, about how I'm so talented and focused, and I didn't want to make you sad. Logan watched Vivian's face crumble, watched her pull her daughter into a hug that was awkward and desperate all at once. I don't care about the piano, Vivian said, her voice thick. I care about you. If you hate it, then you stop. Today. Right now. Really? Really. I'm sorry I didn't ask before. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to do things to make me happy instead of doing what makes you happy. Chloe hugged her mother back, and over her head, Vivian's eyes met Logan's. There were tears there, and gratitude, and something that looked like fear. Later, after Chloe had calmed down and Mia had convinced her to come play video games in the rec room, Logan found Vivian in the kitchen staring at a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. I've been doing everything wrong, she said without preamble. All of it. The lessons, the structure, the schedule. I thought I was helping her heal, and I was just making it worse. You were doing what you thought was right. That's all any parent can do. It wasn't enough. It's never enough. Kids are messy and complicated, and they need different things at different times. You can't solve them like a business problem. Vivian laughed, but it came out broken. I don't know how to not do that. I don't know how to be the mother she needs. So learn. You've been learning for weeks now. You're getting better. What if I'm not good enough? What if the judge looks at me and sees exactly what Margaret and Richard see? A woman who prioritizes everything except her own child. Logan moved around the counter to stand next to her. Then we show them different. We show them a mother who's trying, who's changing, who loves her daughter enough to admit when she's wrong and do better. Is that what you see? Yeah, that's exactly what I see. The words hung between them, honest and raw. Vivian turned to face him fully, and Logan realized how close they were standing. Close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Close enough to smell her perfume. Close enough that if he leaned in just a little, he stepped back. I should check on the girls. Right. Yes, of course. Logan left before he could do something stupid. before he could forget that this was temporary and Vivian was his employer, and nothing about this was real, no matter how real it was starting to feel. The week before Christmas brought unexpected chaos in the form of Vivian's company holiday party. Apparently it was a major annual event. Black tie, hundreds of employees and clients, held at a hotel ballroom downtown. And this year Logan was expected to attend as Vivian's husband. "I don't do black tie," Logan said when Vivian informed him of this 2 days before the event. "You do now. I've already arranged for a tuxedo fitting." "Vivian, Logan, I need you there. My entire executive team will be watching. The board members, investors. Everyone will want to meet my new husband and assess whether this marriage is legitimate or exactly what Margaret and Richard are claiming it is. So I'm supposed to perform." "Oh, we're both performing. That was the agreement." She wasn't wrong. Logan had agreed to this, had agreed to play the role of devoted husband whenever needed. He just hadn't expected it to feel so much like walking into enemy territory. The tuxedo fitting was its own special kind of torture. A tailor with measuring tape and pins who kept making small sounds of disapproval, while Logan stood there feeling like a kid playing dress-up in his father's clothes. "Your shoulders are quite broad, the tailor noted. "Athletic build. We'll need to adjust the jacket significantly." "Sorry for not being tuxedo-shaped," Logan muttered. By the time the tailor finished, Logan barely recognized himself in the mirror. The man looking back at him was polished and sophisticated, someone who belonged at fancy parties and hotel ballrooms. Someone who could stand next to Vivian Sinclair without looking like he'd wandered in from a garage. The night of the party, Logan put on the tuxedo and stared at himself in the bathroom mirror for a solid 5 minutes. He looked like a fraud, like someone pretending to be something he wasn't, which, he supposed, was accurate. Vivian knocked on his bedroom door at exactly 7. When he opened it, the breath went out of him. She was wearing a floor-length gown in deep emerald green, her hair styled in an elegant updo, makeup subtle but flawless. She looked like every fantasy of old Hollywood glamour, untouchable and stunning. "You look nice," Logan managed, which was possibly the understatement of the century. "You look uncomfortable. That obvious?" "Only to me." Vivian adjusted his bow tie with quick, efficient movements. Her fingers brushed his collar, and Logan tried very hard not to think about how close she was. "Remember, we're happily married. We're a team. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong there, because you have just as much right to be in that room as anyone else. I'm a mechanic pretending to be a billionaire's husband. You're my husband. That's not pretending." She paused. "At least not tonight." The ballroom was exactly as overwhelming as Logan had feared. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a string quartet playing in the corner, people in evening wear that probably cost more than his truck, holding champagne glasses and conducting the kind of conversations where every word was a chess move. Vivian kept her hand in the crook of his elbow as they worked the room, introducing him to people whose names he immediately forgot. CEOs and investors and board members who all smiled politely, while clearly assessing whether Logan was worthy of Vivian Sinclair. "And this is your new husband?" one woman asked, looking Logan up and down like he was livestock at auction. "How delightful. Where did you two meet?" "Through mutual friends," Vivian said smoothly. "Sometimes you just know when you found the right person." "How romantic. And what is it you do, Logan?" "I own a garage, auto repair." The woman's smile went brittle. "How practical." They moved on, and Logan felt Vivian's grip on his arm tighten fractionally. "I'm making you look bad," he said quietly. "You're making them uncomfortable because you don't fit their narrow definition of acceptable. That's their problem, not yours." "Bars Tamasas." An older man in an expensive suit approached, his expression carefully neutral. "Vivian. Lovely party, as always. Gerald, thank you for coming." Something in Vivian's voice had changed, gone colder. "This is my husband, Logan Carter. Logan, this is Gerald Hutchins. He sits on our board." Logan shook his hand and immediately disliked the calculating look in Gerald's eyes. "And I was surprised to hear about the marriage," Gerald said. "Quite sudden, wasn't it?" "Yep. We didn't see the point in waiting. Of course, especially with the custody hearing coming up. Very strategic timing. Vivian's expression could have frozen fire. My marriage has nothing to do with strategy. No, that's unlike you. You've always been so good at thinking 3 moves ahead. Is there something specific you're implying, Gerald? Shades. Simply that some people might view this marriage as a convenient solution to a legal problem rather than a genuine partnership. I'm sure the judge will be interested in that perspective. Logan felt anger flash hot in his chest. You plan on sharing that perspective with Margaret and Richard Sinclair said. Gerald's smile was thin. I plan on sharing my honest assessment when asked for it. I've known Harrison's parents for 30 years. They deserve the truth about who's raising their granddaughter. Oh, the truth is that Chloe has a mother who loves her in a stable home. Anything else is just your opinion. And what makes you qualified to judge what's best for that child? You've known her what, 2 months? I know she's happier now than she's been in 2 years. I know she's actually talking again, laughing again. If you cared about her at all instead of caring about taking Vivian down, you'd see that. Gerald's expression went hard. Be careful, Mr. Carter. You're out of your depth here. Gentlemen, Vivian's voice cut between them like a blade. This is neither the time nor the place. Gerald, if you have concerns about my parenting, you're welcome to share them with my attorney. Logan, I need to speak with the CFO. Excuse us. She pulled Logan away before he could say something that would definitely make things worse. They ended up on a balcony overlooking the city, the winter air cold enough to burn. I'm sorry, Logan said immediately. I shouldn't have engaged with him. Don't apologize for defending me. Or Chloe. Vivian leaned against the balcony railing, her breath fogging in the cold. Gerald has been gunning for my position since Harrison died. He was close with Harrison's parents. He'll absolutely testify against me if asked. Can he do that? He's a board member of my company and a family friend. His word carries weight. She closed her eyes. We're going to lose. The hearing is in 2 weeks, and we're going to lose. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because Margaret and Richard are right. I have been a terrible mother. I've prioritized work over Chloe. I've let strangers raise her while I built my empire. And now I have a fake husband I barely know trying to convince a judge that we're a real family when we're nothing but a contract. Logan moved to stand next to her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Below them, the city stretched out in lights and shadows. You want to know what I think? I'm sure you're going to tell me anyway. I think you're so busy punishing yourself for past mistakes that you can't see how much you've changed. The Vivian I met 2 months ago wouldn't have canceled piano lessons because Chloe was unhappy, wouldn't have come home for dinner, wouldn't have built a blanket fort or read bedtime stories or asked her daughter what she actually wanted instead of what the schedule dictated. That's all because of you. It's because you decided to try. I just gave you permission. Logan turned to face her. You're not perfect. Neither am I. Neither is anyone. But you're trying, and that matters. Any judge worth a damn will see that. Vivian looked at him, really looked at him. And for a moment, something passed between them that felt dangerous and real, and nothing like a business arrangement. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. Any of it. The parenting, the marriage, letting people in. I'm so terrified of failing that I can barely breathe most days. Then be terrified. Be a mess. Just keep showing up anyway. Is that what you do? Every single day since Sarah died. Some days I do it better than others, but I keep showing up for Mia because that's what she needs. Same as Chloe needs you to keep showing up even when you're scared. Vivian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Why are you being so kind to me? Because someone should be, and because under all the Ice Queen executive armor, you're not nearly as terrible as you think you are. She laughed, wet and broken. That's a low bar. It's a start. They stood on the balcony as snow began to fall, light flakes drifting down through the city lights. Inside, the party continued without them. Hundreds of people networking and politicking and playing their own elaborate games. Out here, it was just the two of them, and the truth neither was quite ready to speak. When they finally went back inside, Vivian kept her hand in Logan's for the rest of the night, and it didn't feel like an act anymore. The morning after the holiday party, Logan woke to his phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. He fumbled for it, squinting at the screen through sleep-blurred eyes. 7 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize, and 3 text messages from Marcus. The texts were all variations of the same panic. "Boss, you need to see this," and "Call me ASAP." And finally, "They're saying you married Vivian Sinclair for money." Logan sat up too fast, his head spinning. He opened his browser and typed in Vivian's name, and his stomach dropped. The headline was everywhere. Every gossip site, every business news outlet, every social media platform lighting up with the same story. Billionaire CEO's convenient marriage, love or legal strategy. The articles featured photos from last night's party, him and Vivian on the balcony, standing close, her hand in his. Except the photos had been taken from an angle that made it look staged, artificial, and the accompanying text was brutal. Anonymous sources claimed the marriage was a sham designed to influence the custody case. Gerald Hutchins hadn't been named directly, but his fingerprints were all over the carefully worded quotes about strategic timing and questionable motives. One article had dug up Logan's financial history: the failed garage, the medical debt, the eviction notices. They'd painted him as a desperate man who'd sold himself to the highest bidder. The worst part was they weren't entirely wrong. Logan's phone rang again. This time it was Vivian. "Have you seen it?" Her voice was tight, controlled, but he could hear the panic underneath. "Yeah, I'm looking at it now. My attorney just called. Margaret and Richard's legal team is using this as evidence that our marriage is fraudulent. They're requesting an emergency hearing to revisit the custody arrangement immediately." Can they do that? They just did. We have 72 hours to respond. Vivian's breath hitched. "Logan, this is bad. This is really bad. If the judge thinks we lied, if they believe this marriage is fake, then we prove it's not. How? By showing them our separate bedrooms? Our complete lack of actual relationship history? The contract we both signed?" Logan ran his hand through his hair, his mind racing. "We show them what's real, Chloe laughing, the blanket fort, you reading bedtime stories. Your daughter actually being happy for the first time in 2 years. That's real, Vivian. They can't fake that. But we can fake a marriage. We did fake a marriage." Her voice cracked. "I'm going to lose her. After everything, I'm going to lose Chloe because I was stupid enough to think a piece of paper would be enough." "You're not going to lose her." "You don't know that." "No, but I know you don't give up. So stop spiraling and start fighting." There was silence on the other end of the line, then a shaky breath. "I need to go into the office. Do damage control. The board is probably convening right now to discuss whether my personal life is affecting company stability. Want me to come with you? To my office? Why? Because you shouldn't have to walk into that alone. Because I'm your husband, at least on paper, and that means something." Another pause. "Okay, meet me downstairs in 20 minutes. The drive into the city was tense and silent. Vivian stared out the window while Logan drove, her phone buzzing constantly with calls she was ignoring. When they pulled into the parking garage of Sinclair Industries headquarters, she finally spoke. "You don't have to do this. I know. They're going to tear you apart in there. Ask questions you can't answer. Try to make you crack. Let them try." Vivian looked at him, and something in her expression softened. "Thank you. For this? For everything." "Don't thank me yet. I might make everything worse." "You won't." The executive floor was chaos. Staff members rushed between offices, phones rang off the hook, and Logan could feel the stares following them as Vivian led him to the conference room. Inside, the board was already assembled, 12 people in expensive suits looking varying degrees of concerned and angry. Gerald Hutchins sat at the far end of the table, his expression carefully neutral in a way that made Logan want to punch him. "Vivian, Mr. Carter." The chairman, an older man named Robert Chen, gestured to the empty seats. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "What's this about, Robert?" Vivian asked, though they all knew exactly what it was about. "I think you know. These articles, the allegations about your marriage, they're creating a PR nightmare. Our stock dropped 3 points this morning. Investors are calling asking if our CEO is stable enough to lead during a personal crisis. My personal life has never affected my job performance. It's affecting it now." This from Gerald, his voice smooth as poison. "The optics are terrible, Vivian. A sudden marriage right before a custody hearing. Marrying a man with significant financial problems? It looks exactly like what the articles are saying it is. My husband's financial situation is irrelevant to his character or our relationship. Is it? Or did you simply find someone desperate enough to agree to your terms? Gerald leaned forward. I'm not trying to attack you, Vivian. I'm trying to protect this company. If these allegations are true, if you fabricated a marriage to influence a legal proceeding, that's fraud. The company can't be associated with that. Logan felt Vivian go rigid beside him. He reached under the table and found her hand, threading his fingers through hers. She squeezed tight enough to hurt. The allegations are false, Logan said clearly. Vivian and I are married, legally and legitimately. What anyone thinks about our timeline or our reasons is their opinion, not fact. But you can understand how it looks, Robert said, his tone gentler than Gerald's, but no less pointed. We need to consider asking Vivian to step aside temporarily, just until this situation resolves. You want me to resign? Vivian's voice was ice. Step aside. Temporarily. Let the dust settle. Focus on your family situation without the added pressure of running the company. Absolutely not. Vivian, be reasonable. I built this company. I've tripled its value in 5 years. I've delivered consistent returns, expanded into new markets, and navigated every crisis thrown at us with success. And you want me to step aside because I fell in love and got married? You didn't fall in love. Gerald's voice was flat. You executed a strategy. There's a difference. You don't know anything about my marriage. Don't I? I know you've been too focused on work to maintain any kind of personal relationship for years. I know this man appeared out of nowhere weeks before your custody hearing. I know you're terrified of losing Chloe, and you'd do anything to prevent that, including lie to a court. Vivian stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This meeting is over. If you want to remove me as CEO, call a vote. But I'm not stepping aside voluntarily, and I'm not going to sit here and be accused of fraud by a man who's been trying to undermine me since my husband died. She walked out and Logan followed, leaving the board in shocked silence. And they made it as far as Vivian's private office before she collapsed into her desk chair, her hands shaking. Logan closed the door behind them and engaged the lock. They're going to vote me out, Vivian said to the empty air. Gerald's been waiting for an opening like this. He'll convince them I'm a liability. Maybe. Or maybe they'll remember that you're the best thing that's happened to this company in a decade. It doesn't matter. Even if they don't remove me, the damage is done. The custody hearing is in 3 days. 3 days, Logan. And now we have to walk into that courtroom with every judge and lawyer having read articles about how our marriage is fake. Logan pulled up a chair across from her desk. Logan pulled up a... Then we give them something they can't ignore. Something so obviously real they can't deny it. Like what? The truth. Vivian laughed bitterly. The truth is that you married me for money, and I married you for legal advantage. That's not exactly compelling testimony. That's how it started, but it's not the whole truth anymore, is it? Vivian met his eyes, and Logan saw her understand what he was saying, saw her recognize what had been building between them for weeks, the thing neither of them had been willing to name. I don't know what this is, she said quietly. I don't know what we are. Neither do I. But I know it's not fake, not anymore. And I know that when I think about this arrangement ending, about walking away and never seeing you or Chloe again, it makes me feel sick. That's real, Vivian. Whatever else this is, that's real. We have a contract, an end date. We agreed. I know what we agreed, but contracts can be renegotiated. Logan, I'm not saying we need to decide everything right now. I'm saying we stop pretending we're just business partners when we both know that's not true anymore. He leaned forward. Tell me you don't feel it. Tell me I'm imagining this, and I'll back off. Vivian opened her mouth, closed it again. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I can't tell you that. Then we use it. We walk into that courtroom and we tell the judge that, yes, this marriage started as an arrangement, but somewhere along the way, it became real. We became real. And Chloe is happy because of it. They'll never believe us. They will if we believe it first. Vivian stared at him for a long moment, and Logan could see her mind working, calculating risks and odds and potential outcomes the way she always did. This could destroy everything, she finally said. Or it could save everything. Either way, I'm in. All the way. Are you? Vivian took a shaky breath, then nodded. Yes, all the way. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Vivian's attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Reeves, worked around the clock building their defense. She interviewed both girls, documented every positive change in Chloe's behavior, gathered testimony from teachers and doctors, and even Mrs. Chen about the family dynamic. This is good, Patricia said during one of their late-night strategy sessions. The evidence of Chloe's improvement is undeniable, but we need to address the marriage directly. The opposing counsel will attack it hard. We're prepared for that, Vivian said. Are you? Because they're going to ask very personal questions about your relationship timeline, your living arrangements, your intimate life. It's going to be invasive and uncomfortable. Logan felt heat creep up his neck at the implication. He and Vivian hadn't discussed that aspect of their fake marriage. They'd maintained completely separate lives, separate bedrooms, barely more than roommates who occasionally ate dinner together. We'll handle it, Vivian said firmly. After Patricia left, Logan and Vivian sat in her study nursing glasses of wine neither was actually drinking. She's right, Logan finally said. They're going to ask about things we can't answer honestly. Then we don't answer honestly. Vivian, I'm not losing Chloe because we have separate bedrooms, Logan. If we have to lie about that part, then we lie. You're really okay with that? I'm okay with whatever it takes to keep my daughter. Vivian set down her wine glass. Are you? Logan thought about Chloe's smile when she'd learned he was going to teach her about cars, about Mia's excitement at having a sister, even a temporary one, about how the mansion had slowly started feeling less like a museum and more like a home. Yeah, I'm okay with it. The night before the hearing, Logan couldn't sleep. He paced his room, rehearsing answers to questions he knew were coming, trying to find the line between truth and lie that wouldn't break under scrutiny. Around 2 a.m., there was a soft knock on his door. Vivian stood in the hallway wearing pajamas and a robe, her hair down, looking younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Can't sleep either? Logan asked. Keep thinking about everything that could go wrong tomorrow. Want to come in? Vivian hesitated, then nodded. Logan stepped aside and she entered his room for the first time since they'd moved into the estate. She looked around at his sparse belongings, the few personal items that marked the space as his. You haven't really moved in, she observed. Didn't seem like the point. This was always temporary. Was it? Logan looked at her, at the question in her eyes that echoed the question in his own head. I don't know anymore. Boy, Vivian moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered grounds illuminated by landscape lighting. I'm terrified. Not just of losing the hearing, of what happens after. Whether we win or lose, things are going to change. Change isn't always bad. It is when you've built your entire life around control and predictability. She turned to face him. You've made me question everything, Logan. The way I parent, the way I work, the walls I've built to keep people out. And I don't know if I'm grateful for that or angry about it. Probably both. Probably both, she agreed. Can I ask you something? Sure. If we win tomorrow, if the judge rules in my favor and the custody case is resolved, what happens to us? Logan's heart was pounding. What do you want to happen? I don't know. The contract says we stay married for a year minimum. But that was before this, whatever this is. And if there was no contract, if you could choose anything? Vivian crossed the room until she was standing directly in front of him, close enough that he could count the gold flecks in her eyes, see the uncertainty and hope warring in her expression. I'd choose to find out what we could be if we stopped pretending, she said quietly. If we actually tried. For real. Logan reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. Then that's what we do. After tomorrow, we figure out what real looks like. Promise? Promise. Vivian leaned into him and Logan wrapped his arms around her, holding her while she trembled with fear and exhaustion and hope. They stood like that for a long time, not speaking, just being together in the quiet dark. When Vivian finally pulled back, her eyes were red but determined. I should try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. Yeah. She started toward the door, then paused. Logan, thank you for being exactly who you are, for not trying to be anything else. Same to you, Masa. After she left, Logan lay in bed staring at the ceiling and trying not to think about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. Trying not to think about how much was riding on convincing a judge that a relationship built on lies had somehow become true. The courthouse was exactly as grim as Logan remembered from their wedding day. Gray stone, harsh fluorescent lighting, the smell of floor wax and old paper. They arrived early, meeting Patricia in a conference room to review their testimony one final time. Remember, Patricia said, her voice crisp and professional, answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer information. If you're not sure how to respond, pause and think. There's no rush. Vivian nodded, her face a mask of calm control, but Logan could see her hands shaking where they rested in her lap. Margaret and Richard Sinclair arrived with their attorney, a predatory-looking man named Thomas Brennan who had a reputation for destroying witnesses on the stand. They didn't acknowledge Vivian or Logan, just took their seats on the opposite side of the courtroom like enemies preparing for war. Chloe wasn't present. The judge had ruled that her testimony would be conducted privately in chambers, but Logan could feel her absence like a weight. This entire circus was about her, and she didn't even get to be in the room. The judge was a woman in her late 50s named Honor Mitchell. She had a reputation for being fair but exacting, and she looked at both parties with an expression that gave nothing away. This is a modification hearing regarding custody of Chloe Marie Sinclair, Judge Mitchell said. Mr. Brennan, you may present your opening statement. What followed was a systematic destruction of Vivian's character. Brennan painted her as a career-obsessed woman who'd neglected her daughter in favor of corporate ambitions. He presented evidence of Chloe's declining mental health in the 2 years since Harrison's death. He brought up the long hours, the nannies, the structured schedule that left no room for actual parenting. Then he turned his attention to the marriage. Mrs. Sinclair's sudden marriage to Mr. Carter is highly suspect, Brennan said, pacing in front of the judge's bench. The timeline alone is damning. They met weeks before this hearing, married within days. Mr. Carter was facing financial ruin, and Mrs. Sinclair needed to appear as a stable, two-parent household. The arrangement benefits both parties materially while doing nothing to address the fundamental issue, that Chloe Sinclair deserves a home where she is prioritized, not an afterthought. Patricia stood for their rebuttal, and Logan was reminded why Vivian had hired her. She was calm, precise, and utterly unshakable. Your Honor, the petitioners would have you believe that love operates on a timeline, that genuine connection can't happen quickly, or that people in difficult circumstances can't also fall in love. They're wrong on both counts. Yes, Mr. Carter and Mrs. Sinclair's courtship was brief. But brief doesn't mean false. And the evidence will show that since their marriage, Chloe's well-being has improved dramatically. She's happier, more engaged, showing signs of healing from her trauma. That's not coincidence. That's the result of a stable, loving family environment that didn't exist before. We'll see what the evidence shows, Judge Mitchell said neutrally. Mr. Brennan, call your first witness. The petitioners started with their experts, a child psychologist who'd evaluated Chloe months ago and testified that she showed signs of emotional neglect, a family therapist who spoke about the importance of stable attachment figures. They called Margaret Sinclair, who cried on the stand talking about her dead son and her fear that her granddaughter was being raised by strangers. It was effective, painfully so. Logan watched Vivian's face go paler with each testimony, watched her absorb every blow like she deserved it. Then it was their turn. Patricia called Chloe's current therapist, who testified that Chloe had made remarkable progress in the past 3 months. She was sleeping better, eating regularly, engaging in play instead of just going through motions. The therapist attributed this directly to the improved home environment. They called Chloe's teacher, who talked about how the little girl had started participating in class, making friends, showing signs of joy that hadn't been there before. They called Mrs. Chen, who described the changes she'd witnessed firsthand, the family dinners, the laughter, the way Chloe had started seeking out her mother instead of avoiding her. And then Patricia called Logan to the stand. He'd been dreading this all week, but walking to the witness box, placing his hand on the Bible and swearing to tell the truth, Logan felt strangely calm. He'd spent so long lying that the truth felt like a relief, even the complicated version of it. Brennan went straight for the throat. Mr. Carter, You were in significant financial distress when you met Mrs. Sinclair, correct? Yes. Facing eviction, unable to pay your daughter's medical bills, your business failing, is that accurate? Yes. And Mrs. Sinclair offered you a substantial amount of money to marry her. Isn't that true? Logan met Vivian's eyes across the courtroom. This was it. The moment where they either committed to the lie or burned everything down with honesty. Yes, Logan said clearly. She did. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Mitchell banged her gavel for silence. Vivian's face had gone white. So, you admit this marriage was a financial transaction? Brennan looked triumphant. Brennan, I admit that's how it started. Vivian needed a husband for the custody case. I needed money to take care of my daughter. We made an arrangement that benefited both of us. A fake marriage. It was supposed to be, yeah. Just a piece of paper and some public appearances. That was the deal. Was. Brennan pounced on the past tense. Are you suggesting something changed? Logan looked at Vivian again, saw the fear and hope warring in her expression, and made his choice. Everything changed. Living in that house, watching Vivian actually try to connect with her daughter, seeing Chloe come back to life bit by bit. Somewhere in the middle of all that, it stopped being fake. We became a family. A real one. How convenient. Right before this hearing. It wasn't convenient, it was terrifying. Because I'd signed up for a temporary arrangement, and suddenly I was in deep with people I actually cared about. People I didn't want to lose. You expect this court to believe that you fell in love with a woman you barely know? I expect this court to believe that love doesn't operate on a schedule, that sometimes the best things happen when you're not planning them, and that whether you believe our marriage started honestly or not, what matters is that Chloe is better now than she was before. She's happy. She's healing. And that's because she has a mother who's learning to prioritize her, and a home that feels safe instead of empty. Brennan tried to shake him, asked about their living arrangements, their separate bedrooms, the timeline of their relationship. Logan answered truthfully when he could and deflected when he couldn't, never losing sight of the point, that Chloe's well-being had improved, and that was what mattered. When he finally stepped down, Vivian was crying silently, tears streaming down her face while she tried to maintain her composure. Then Patricia called Vivian to the stand. Vivian walked to the witness box like she was walking to her execution. But when she swore her oath and faced the courtroom, something in her expression hardened into determination. Brennan was merciless. He went through every failure, every missed bedtime, every moment she'd chosen work over her daughter. He made her list the nannies who'd raised Chloe, the staff members who knew her daughter better than she did, the schedule that had prioritized achievement over attachment. You've been a terrible mother, Brennan's. Bravo, Brennan said bluntly. Why should this court believe you deserve custody? Vivian's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I have been a terrible mother. You're absolutely right. After Harrison died, I didn't know how to handle my own grief, let alone help my daughter through hers. So I did what I'm good at. I created structure and schedules and tried to solve the problem like it was a business challenge. And I failed, spectacularly. The honesty seemed to catch Brennan off guard. You're admitting you're unfit? I'm admitting I was failing, past tense, because Logan was right about what he said. Everything changed, not because I married him, but because he showed me what I was doing wrong. He taught me how to actually be present with my daughter, how to listen instead of directing, how to let her be a kid instead of a project to optimize. How touching. But we're supposed to believe this transformation happened in mere weeks. No, we're supposed to look at the evidence of Chloe's improvement and recognize that something in her environment changed for the better. Whether you believe my marriage is real or whether you think I'm capable of sustained change, those are your opinions. But Chloe's well-being is measurable fact. She's healthier, happier, and more stable than she's been since her father died. That's not fake. That's the result of having a home where she's actually seen and heard and valued. Vivian looked directly at Margaret and Richard. I know you loved Harrison. I know you're hurting and you think taking Chloe will somehow make that better. But she's not Harrison. She's her own person and she needs her mother. Even if her mother is still learning how to do this right. Even if her mother makes mistakes. She needs me and I need her. And I'm begging you not to take her away from the first real home she's had in 2 years. The courtroom was silent except for Vivian's quiet crying. Judge Mitchell's expression was unreadable. "Do you have any further questions, Mr. Brennan?" Brennan looked at Vivian, at the raw honesty and pain on her face, and seemed to calculate whether pressing harder would help or hurt his case. "No further questions, Your Honor. I am After both sides rested, Judge Mitchell called for a brief recess before she'd deliver her ruling. Logan found Vivian in the hallway, leaning against the wall with her eyes closed. "You were incredible in there," he said. "I told the truth. Finally." "That took guts." Vivian opened her eyes. "You told them about the arrangement, about the money." "I thought we were going to deny all of that." I couldn't. Not when I was under oath. Not when the truth was sitting right there in plain sight." Logan moved closer. "And I meant what I said. About it becoming real. About not wanting to lose you or Chloe." "Logan, I know this is complicated. I know we have a contract and an end date and 100 reasons why this doesn't make sense. But I don't care. I'm in. For real. If you'll have me." Vivian stared at him, her eyes searching his face for something she seemed to find. "We're about to find out if I even get to keep my daughter. Maybe we should table the relationship conversation until—" "Hey!" Logan cupped her face gently. "Whatever happens in there, we deal with it together. That's what this is now. Together." "Together," Vivian repeated, and it sounded like a promise. They filed back into the courtroom and waited while Judge Mitchell reviewed her notes. The silence was excruciating. Finally, the judge looked up. "I've listened carefully to all the testimony presented today. This is a difficult case because there are no clear villains. The petitioners love their granddaughter and genuinely believe they're acting in her best interest. Mrs. Sinclair has been honest about her shortcomings and is actively working to improve. And the evidence suggests that Chloe's current environment, whatever its origins, is beneficial to her well-being." Logan felt Vivian's hand find his under the table, gripping tight. Vivian's hand. "The question before me is not whether Mrs. Sinclair is a perfect mother. Perfection is an impossible standard. The question is whether she is capable of providing a safe, stable, loving home for her daughter. And based on the evidence presented, including the dramatic improvement in Chloe's mental and emotional health over the past 3 months, I believe she is." Vivian made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "Therefore, I'm ruling in favor of the respondent. Custody of Chloe Marie Sinclair will remain with her mother, Vivian Sinclair. The petitioners will retain their current visitation rights, but this court sees no reason to modify the existing custody arrangement." Judge Mitchell banged her gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." The courtroom erupted. Margaret Sinclair was crying, being comforted by her husband. Their attorney looked furious. Patricia was gathering her papers with a satisfied smile. And Vivian was shaking so hard Logan thought she might fall apart right there in the courtroom. "We won," she whispered. "We actually won. You won. You fought for your daughter, and you won." Vivian turned to him, tears streaming down her face, and kissed him right there in front of everyone. The judge, the attorneys, the Sinclairs, all of it. Kissed him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had been spinning out of control. When she pulled back, Logan was dimly aware of camera flashes, of people staring, of Margaret Sinclair's horrified expression. "Was that real enough?" Vivian asked, her voice shaky with laughter and tears. "Yeah," Logan said, pulling her close. "That was real enough." They picked up Chloe from Patricia's office where she'd been waiting with a child advocate during the hearing. The moment Vivian walked through the door, Chloe's face transformed from anxious to hopeful to relieved in the span of a heartbeat. "Did we win?" she asked, her voice small. Vivian dropped to her knees and pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. "We won, baby. You're staying with me. You're staying home." Chloe burst into tears, clinging to her mother like she'd disappear if she let go. Logan watched them and felt his own eyes burning. Patricia excused herself quietly, giving them privacy for a moment that belonged to no one else. When Chloe finally pulled back, she looked at Logan with those serious dark eyes. "Are you staying too?" The question hit him harder than any cross-examination had, because the truth was complicated and messy, and he still wasn't entirely sure what staying meant. "Yeah," he said, making the decision in that moment. "I'm staying." Chloe threw herself at him next, small arms wrapping around his waist. And Logan hugged her back while Vivian watched with an expression he couldn't quite read. They drove home in a silence that felt different than the tense quiet of the morning. Lighter. Like they'd all been holding their breath for months and could finally exhale. Mia was waiting when they got back, practically vibrating with anxiety, until Vivian told her the news. Then both girls were screaming and jumping and hugging each other in a tangle of relief and joy that made Mrs. Chen smile from the kitchen doorway. That night, Vivian ordered pizza instead of having the staff cook. They ate in the breakfast nook with paper plates and greasy fingers, and Chloe told them about the advocate who'd interviewed her in chambers. "She asked if I was happy here," Chloe said, pulling cheese off her slice. "I said yes. I told her about the blanket fort and learning about cars and how Mom reads to me now before bed every night. She wrote it all down like it was important. It was important," Vivian said quietly. "You were the most important part of that whole hearing, even if you weren't in the room." "Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us?" The question hung in the air. Logan had seen Margaret and Richard's faces when the judge delivered her ruling. They weren't just mad, they were devastated. "They're hurt," Vivian said carefully. "They miss your dad, and they love you very much. They wanted you with them because they thought it would help them feel less sad about losing him." "But I would have been sad leaving you." "I know, baby. And the judge knew that too. That's why you're staying here." Chloe thought about this, processing it with the seriousness of a kid who'd been forced to grow up too fast. "Can we still visit them sometimes? I don't want them to be sad forever." "Boys," Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "Of course we can. That's very kind of you." After dinner, the girls disappeared upstairs to play video games, their laughter drifting down through the house. Logan helped Vivian clear the pizza boxes, and they worked in comfortable silence until she finally spoke. "We need to talk about what happens now." "I know. That kiss in the courtroom, was that just for show?" Logan turned to face her. "What do you think?" "I think I've spent 3 months telling myself this was temporary, that I couldn't let myself feel anything real because it would make the ending harder, but I failed at that pretty spectacularly." "Yeah, me too." Vivian leaned against the counter, her arms crossed like she was trying to hold herself together. "I don't know how to do this, Logan. The real relationship thing, I was barely competent at it when it was arranged. How am I supposed to navigate something that's actually complicated? The same way we've been navigating everything else. We figure it out as we go. That's not a plan. That's chaos. Welcome to relationships. They're pretty much all chaos." She laughed despite herself, but it was shaky. "What if we mess this up? What if trying to make it real ruins what we've built? Then we mess it up and deal with the consequences." "But Vivian, we're already in this. Pretending we can go back to being strangers who share a house isn't going to protect anyone, least of all those 2 kids upstairs who think we're a family. We are a family, just a weird, unconventional one that started with a contract. All families are weird. Some just hide it better." Vivian moved closer, closing the distance between them until she was near enough to touch. "If we do this, if we actually try, I need you to know that I'm going to be terrible at it. I'm going to work too much and forget to communicate and probably try to solve emotional problems with spreadsheets. And I'm going to be too casual about things that matter and avoid conflict until it explodes and definitely make jokes at inappropriate times." Sounds like a disaster. "Absolutely. But maybe it'll be our disaster." Vivian reached up and kissed him, soft and tentative, like she was testing whether this was real or another performance. Logan pulled her closer and kissed her back, trying to convey everything he didn't have words for yet. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "We're really doing this," she said. "Yeah, we really are." The next few weeks were strange in the best possible way. They started actually living together instead of existing in parallel. Logan moved his things from the guest room to Vivian's suite, not because anyone was watching, but because it felt right. They had dinner together every night when Vivian's schedule allowed. They argued about silly things like what to watch on TV and serious things like how much structure Chloe actually needed versus how much freedom. The board at Sinclair Industries had backed down after the custody ruling, Gerald's attempted coup fizzling when other members pointed out that Vivian's personal life had zero impact on her job performance. She'd shown up to the next meeting with her head high and presented a quarterly report that exceeded all projections. Gerald had resigned 2 weeks later, citing personal reasons, and no one missed him. Logan reopened his garage, but on different terms. He hired Marcus as a full partner and started taking on restoration projects instead of just repair work. The Mustang had been the prototype. He'd finished it in January and driven Chloe around the block with the top down despite the cold, her delighted laughter worth the frostbite. Word spread, and suddenly people were bringing him classic cars that needed love and attention and someone who actually cared about doing it right. Mia's health continued to improve. The anemia was managed with proper medication and nutrition, and her energy levels were better than they'd been in years. She and Chloe had become actual sisters, complete with inside jokes and occasional fights over whose turn it was to pick the movie. Watching them together reminded Logan that family wasn't always about blood. Sometimes it was about showing up and choosing each other every day. But not everything was simple. Margaret and Richard Sinclair remained a presence, exercising their visitation rights with rigid formality. The first few visits had been tense, everyone walking on eggshells, but slowly something had shifted. Margaret started asking Chloe actual questions about her life instead of interrogating her. Richard brought books he thought she'd like. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was movement towards something less hostile. One Saturday in early March, they had both sets of grandparents over for lunch, a suggestion from Vivian that had made Logan's stomach drop. His parents lived 3 hours away and rarely visited, uncomfortable with the wealth and formality of the estate. But Vivian had insisted, saying that if they were doing this for real, their families needed to actually meet. The lunch was predictably awkward. Logan's dad, a retired carpenter, had nothing in common with Richard Sinclair beyond both having granddaughters. Margaret kept making subtle comments about proper table settings and nutrition that made Logan's mother bristle. But the girls ran between the adults like social glue, telling stories and showing off drawings and somehow making the whole thing bearable. At one point, Logan found his mother in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Chen with dessert despite being told she didn't need to. "You doing okay, Ma? This house is ridiculous. Who needs 14 bedrooms?" "Vivian does, apparently." His mother turned to look at him, her expression softer than her words. "But you're happy here? With her?" "Yeah, I really am." "Good. Because she looks at you like you hung the moon, and you look at her the same way. Life's too short to waste time on people who don't make you feel like that." It was the most approval his mother had ever given any relationship decision he'd made, including marrying Sarah. Logan hugged her, and she swatted him away with a dish towel, but she was smiling. The real test came in April when Sinclair Industries had its annual shareholder meeting. Vivian had to present the year's results and field questions from investors, many of whom had read the articles about her marriage and formed their own opinions. She'd asked Logan if he wanted to attend, and he'd agreed despite feeling massively out of his depth. Sitting in the audience, watching Vivian command a room of hundreds of people, fielding aggressive questions with calm precision, breaking down complex financial data into clear narratives, he was reminded that this woman was extraordinary, not because she was wealthy or powerful, but because she was brilliant and driven and completely herself up there. During the Q&A session, one shareholder had stood up with a smirk on his face. "Mrs. Sinclair, there's been considerable speculation about your personal life and whether your recent marriage has affected your judgment. Care to address those concerns?" The room had gone silent. Vivian had smiled, and it wasn't her corporate smile. It was real. "My marriage has affected my judgment considerably," she'd said. "It's taught me that prioritizing personal relationships doesn't make you weak or distracted. It makes you human. And I'm a better CEO now than I was a year ago, specifically because I've learned to balance my professional and personal life instead of sacrificing one for the other." Next question. The shareholder had sat down, and there'd been a smattering of applause. Logan had never been more proud of anyone in his life. That night, lying in bed with Vivian curled against his side, he'd told her as much. "You were incredible up there. I was terrified. Didn't show. Good, that's the point." She'd traced patterns on his chest, her voice quiet in the dark. "Thank you for being there. I know these things are boring as hell." "Wasn't boring. Was actually kind of sexy watching you destroy that guy's condescension." Vivian had laughed. "You have weird taste." "Yeah, I really do." By summer, their life had settled into something that felt normal despite its abnormal origins. The girls finished the school year with good grades and better friendships. Chloe had dropped piano, but picked up soccer, coming home from practice muddy and exhausted and happier than Vivian had ever seen her. Mia decided she wanted to learn guitar, so Logan bought her a cheap acoustic and showed her basic chords, even though his own musical ability topped out at recognizing when something was out of tune. The estate stopped feeling like a museum. There were soccer cleats by the door and guitar cases in the living room and art projects drying on the kitchen counter. Mrs. Chen complained good-naturedly about the mess, but Logan caught her smiling at the chaos more than once. Logan and Vivian fell into routines that were theirs alone. Coffee together in the mornings before the girls woke up. Walking the grounds in the evenings when the weather was nice. Stealing moments in the middle of busy days to text each other stupid jokes or random observations. It wasn't the romance of movies or novels. It was quieter than that. More real. They still fought. About money. Logan struggled with Vivian paying for everything, and she struggled with his pride about it. About parenting styles. She wanted structure, and he wanted flexibility, and they had to find compromises that satisfied neither, but worked for the girls. About his tendency to avoid difficult conversations, and her tendency to treat emotions like problems that could be solved with enough analysis. But they also learned how to fight better, how to actually hear each other instead of just waiting for their turn to talk, how to apologize when they were wrong and accept apologies when they were hurt, how to recognize when they were really fighting about the thing they said they were fighting about versus when they were actually scared or tired or feeling inadequate. One night in July, after a particularly stupid argument about whether to host Chloe's birthday party at the house or at an entertainment venue, they'd ended up laughing at themselves in the kitchen at midnight. "We're fighting about a birthday party," Vivian had said. A birthday party for a kid who'd be happy with cake and her friends regardless of location. "I know, we're idiots. The worst part is we're going to do this again. Fight about something equally stupid in a week, probably tomorrow, knowing us." Vivian had grinned at him. "Want to just do the birthday party here and hire an entertainer? Split the difference?" "That works. You're smart." "I'm occasionally smart. The rest of the time, I'm just stubborn." Same thing, really. They'd kissed in the kitchen, and Logan had marveled at how this had become his life, how the woman he'd married for money had become the woman he couldn't imagine living without. The birthday party ended up being perfect despite, or maybe because of, its imperfection. The entertainer they'd hired canceled last minute, so Logan had ended up organizing games in the backyard while Vivian stress-baked 3 different cakes because she couldn't decide which one Chloe would like best. The kids had eaten all 3 cakes, played until they were exhausted, and Chloe had told Vivian it was the best birthday she'd ever had. Later, after the guests had left and the girls were crashed on the couch watching a movie, Vivian had found Logan cleaning up the backyard. "Leave it. The staff will handle it in the morning." "I don't mind. Gives me something to do with my hands." Vivian had helped anyway, picking up stray paper plates and deflated balloons. They'd worked in comfortable silence until she spoke. "I've been thinking about the contract." Logan's hands had stilled. The contract. The thing they'd both been avoiding talking about because it had an end date that was approaching faster than either wanted to acknowledge. "Yeah? It expires in October, 3 months from now." "I know. We should probably discuss what happens then." Logan had straightened, looking at her across the debris of a child's birthday party. "What do you want to happen?" Vivian had crossed the yard until she was standing directly in front of him, close enough to touch. "I want to tear up the contract. I want to stay married not because a piece of paper says we have to, but because we choose to. Every day, for as long as it works." That's terrifying. No safety net, no predetermined exit strategy. "I know, but I'm tired of having an escape plan. I want to be all in." Logan had pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I've been all in since the blanket fort, if I'm being honest. Maybe before that. Maybe since you showed up at my garage and offered me an impossible choice that turned into the best decision I've ever made. Even though I was using you, even though we were using each other. Turns out sometimes the best things come from the messiest beginnings. They'd stood like that while the summer sun set behind the trees, 2 broken people who'd somehow managed to build something whole. The contract was officially terminated in September. They'd met with Patricia in her office, signed the dissolution paperwork, and walked out with nothing legally binding them together except the marriage license itself. "How does it feel?" Logan had asked as they drove home. "Like jumping off a cliff and hoping there's something other than rocks at the bottom." Romantic? I'm not good at romantic. You're better at it than you think. That night, Vivian had gathered everyone in the living room with an announcement. The girls had looked worried until she explained. "Logan and I are staying married, not because we have to, but because we want to. This family is real now, officially, permanently real." Mia had cheered. Chloe had asked if that meant they were actually sisters for keeps now, not just temporarily. When Vivian confirmed that yes, they were sisters for keeps, both girls had dissolved into excited chaos. Watching them, Logan had felt something shift in his chest. This was his family. These three people who'd come into his life through the strangest circumstances had become his whole world. And he was okay with that, more than okay. The fall brought new routines. Chloe started third grade and joined the debate team because she'd discovered she liked arguing when it was structured and had rules. Mia got braces and complained dramatically about them at every opportunity. Vivian cut back her hours slightly, delegating more to her executive team and actually taking weekends off sometimes. Logan expanded the garage to include a small showroom for the restoration projects, and business was good enough that he was turning work away. They had their first real holiday season as a family. Thanksgiving with both sets of grandparents, which was less awkward than the lunch in March, but still required considerable wine. Christmas with the girls, opening presents in pajamas, while Logan made pancakes and Vivian documented everything with her phone camera, like she was afraid of forgetting a single moment. On New Year's Eve, after the girls were asleep and the house was quiet, Logan and Vivian sat on the back porch wrapped in blankets despite the cold. "What are you thinking about?" Vivian asked. "How different everything is from a year ago. This time last year I was behind on rent, terrified about Mia's medical bills, convinced I was failing at everything. And now I'm sitting here with you in a life I couldn't have imagined even in my wildest dreams." You think you were failing, but you were doing the best you could with what you had. That's all any of us can do. Same applies to you, you know. You weren't failing Chloe. You were surviving and trying to figure it out. Vivian leaned her head on his shoulder. We're quite the pair. Two people who thought they were broken, finding out they just needed the right person to help them heal. That's disgustingly sappy. I know, don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain. Logan kissed the top of her head. Your secret's safe with me. They watched the stars in comfortable silence until Vivian spoke again. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Always. I was relieved when Harrison died. Logan went still, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Not that he was dead, Vivian continued, her voice barely above a whisper, but relieved that I didn't have to keep pretending anymore. Our marriage was exactly what everyone thought yours and mine was, a strategic partnership that looked good on paper. We were friends, sort of, compatible professionally. But there was no love, no real connection. And I spent 5 years telling myself that was fine, that love was overrated, that companionship and shared goals were enough. And then he died. And I felt guilty for being relieved and angry at myself for wasting years in a relationship that was less than what I deserved. Ishti. Vivian, I'm telling you this because I need you to know that what we have is different. What we built from that ridiculous contract is more real than anything I had in my first marriage. You've given me something I didn't think existed, and I'm terrified of losing it. Logan pulled back so he could see her face. You're not going to lose it. I'm not going anywhere. This is it for me, Vivian. You and the girls. This weird, imperfect family we've made. I'm in until the end. Promise? Promise. As winter gave way to spring, Logan realized that somewhere along the way he'd stopped thinking of the estate as Vivian's house and started thinking of it as home. Not because of the building or the grounds or any of the material things, but because this was where his people were. Where Mia ran through the halls with Chloe close behind. Where Vivian read in the library on Sunday afternoons. Where Mrs. Chen hummed while she cooked and pretended to be annoyed by the chaos. He'd also realized something else. The thing he'd been chasing his whole life, stability, security, the ability to provide, had never been about money. It had been about belonging. about having people who chose you and kept choosing you even when things got hard. Sarah would have liked Vivian, he thought sometimes, would have appreciated her dry humor and her fierce protectiveness of the people she loved, would have been glad that Mia had found a sister in Chloe and a mother figure in someone who actually tried, instead of just going through motions. One evening in May, Logan finished up at the garage early and came home to find Vivian and both girls in the backyard. They'd set up an elaborate fort using lawn furniture and bed sheets, and were having some kind of tea party inside it. "Dad," Mia called when she spotted him. "You have to come join. Chloe made rules for the tea party and everything." "There are rules for tea parties?" "Obviously," Chloe said with the seriousness of an 8-year-old who'd found her calling. "Rule 1. Everyone has to use their fancy voice. Rule 2. Pinky fingers up at all times. Rule 3. No discussing boring adult things like taxes or mortgages." Logan looked at Vivian, who was sitting cross-legged in the fort with a plastic teacup balanced delicately in one hand, her pinky extended. "She's very strict about the rules," Vivian said in an exaggerated British accent. Logan crawled into the fort, accepted his teacup from Chloe, and spent the next hour being educated on proper tea party etiquette by two girls who took the whole thing far too seriously. Vivian caught his eye more than once, both of them fighting back laughter at how seriously the girls were taking their imaginary tea. Later, after the girls were in bed and they were cleaning up the backyard, Vivian spoke. "This is what I wanted. All those months ago when I showed up at your garage with my desperate proposal. I wanted Chloe to have this. Silliness and joy and a childhood that felt like a childhood. She has it now. We all have it now, even me. Especially me." Vivian folded the sheet they'd used for the fort. "I spent so long being afraid to let myself feel anything that when I finally did, it was overwhelming. But you made it safe. You made it okay to be imperfect and messy and human. You did the same for me. I spent 3 years after Sarah died just surviving, going through motions, convinced I'd used up my chance at happiness. And then you showed up and proved me wrong." They finished cleaning in silence, but it was the good kind of silence, the kind that came from knowing each other well enough that words weren't always necessary. That night, lying in bed with Vivian's head on his chest and her breathing evening out into sleep, Logan thought about how impossible all of this had seemed. How he'd stood in his freezing garage a year and a half ago and agreed to marry a stranger because he was desperate and out of options. How that desperation had led to this, a life he actually wanted to live, a family he'd choose over and over again. Life had taught him that sometimes the best things came from the worst moments. That rock bottom wasn't the end, but the foundation you built on. That love didn't have to look like fairy tales or romance novels to be real. It could look like two broken people signing a contract, like blanket forts and custody hearings, and learning to be parents together, like fighting about birthday parties and making up over midnight cake, like choosing each other every single day even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The mansion that had once felt cold and empty now felt alive, filled with laughter and arguments and music and mess, filled with people who belonged to each other, not because of blood or obligation, but because they'd chosen to be a family. And on quiet nights when Logan couldn't sleep, when the enormity of how much his life had changed threatened to overwhelm him, he'd remember Vivian's words from that first night they'd really talked. When she'd admitted she didn't know how to do any of this, and he'd told her that was okay, that they'd figure it out together. They had figured it out, were still figuring it out, would probably be figuring it out for the rest of their lives. But they were doing it together, and that made all the difference. Summer came again, bringing with it long days and warm nights and a sense of peace Logan hadn't felt in years. The girls ran through sprinklers in the backyard. Vivian took actual vacation time, and they drove to the coast for a week where Chloe learned to body surf, and Mia collected enough shells to fill 3 buckets. Logan and Vivian walked the beach at sunset while the girls built sandcastles, and he thought about how far they'd all come. "What are you thinking?" Vivian asked, echoing that New Year's Eve question. "That I'm happy, really, genuinely happy. And I spent so long thinking I didn't deserve that I'd lost my chance at it, that actually feeling it is kind of surreal. You deserve it. We all deserve it." "Yeah, I'm starting to believe that." They walked in silence for a while before Logan spoke again. "I know this started as a transaction. I know we went into this for all the wrong reasons. But Vivian, I need you to know that I love you. Not because of the contract or the money or because it's convenient. I love you because you're brilliant and stubborn, and you try so hard even when you're terrified. I love you because you read bedtime stories in funny voices and burn cakes when you're stressed, and you've given me a life I didn't think I could have. Vivian stopped walking, her eyes bright with tears. I love you too. You've taught me that it's okay to need people, that vulnerability isn't weakness, that I can be a CEO and a mother and a wife and not have to choose between them. You've given me everything I didn't know I was missing. They kissed there on the beach while the sun set and the waves crashed, and somewhere behind them, their daughter shrieked with laughter at something probably involving sand in inappropriate places. It wasn't perfect. Their life would never be perfect. There would be more fights and more challenges and more moments of doubt. But they'd face them together, this family they'd built from desperation and hope, and a contract that had become obsolete the moment they'd started actually caring about each other. Because that was the truth Logan had learned through all of this. You didn't need a perfect beginning to have a good ending. You didn't need to have all the answers or follow the right path or do everything correctly. You just needed to show up, to keep trying, to choose the people you loved over and over again until that choice became as natural as breathing. The mansion in Blackwood Ridge wasn't cold anymore. It was full of life and love and the beautiful chaos of a family that had found each other in the strangest way possible. And every time Logan walked through those doors, every time he saw Mia and Chloe playing together or caught Vivian's eye across a crowded room, he was reminded that the best things in life were often the ones you never planned for. The ones that found you when you were broken and desperate and convinced you were out of chances. Sometimes the best families weren't the ones you were born into. Sometimes they were the ones you chose, the ones you fought for, the ones you built from scratch, with nothing but hope and stubbornness and a willingness to try. And sometimes, when you were very lucky, they were the ones that chose you back.